is in session Tuesday, September 15th, 6 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have any roll call, please?
Okay. Gary Cunningham.
Here.
Nathan Long.
Here.
Doug Bryson is absent. Deanna Hinton. Here. Steve Griffiths.
Here.
Riley Hoagland.
Here.
And Bruce Robinson.
Here. Mr. Townsend, do we have any agenda changes or revisions?
No, we don't.
Thank you. Let's bring up the minutes from the September 1st, 2015 meeting. A request for approval.
I move to approve the minutes for the September 1st, 2015 meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Now we have public comments on non-agenda items or matters not involving a public hearing. Please limit comments to 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers should keep in mind that they are being broadcast on live television. Do we have any of those? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Sandy Gruber. I live in Lincoln City. I'm a member of the Lincoln City 50th Anniversary Celebration Committee, and that's why I'm here. We have a parade this Saturday. It will, the parade actually begins at 10 a.m. It should be completed by 12, and we are required to be off of the Highway 101 completely by 1 p.m., but traffic alterations, cones, barricades will go up beginning at 7 a.m., although nothing is really going to change fully until about 9:30. But it's just a warning for people to be aware. There's a parade there. If you're driving through the parade area, please drive slowly. There will be live traffic on the west half of the highway and parade on the east half of the highway. Other than those little concerns, I invite everyone to come and join us for the parade. I highly suggest that you arrive early. The earlier the better, to stake out your viewing spot and not be trying to find a parking spot when the parade starts and miss any of it. There are a few businesses that I know of that are going to be open at 8 a.m. So once you arrive, you have a little bit of shopping or entertainment that you can partake of. And there is a viewing stand at Northeast 15th Street, so if you want to be within hearing of the announcers, I would suggest you get close to there. The parade runs from the Cultural Center north to the Community Center, and immediately following the parade will be a picnic at Curtis Park. It's free hot dogs and drinks and games and music, and a few of our farmers market participants will be there with their booths set up, so you can check out a little bit of our farmers market, get a flavor of what happens every Sunday at the Cultural Center. And this is a parade for us, celebrating us being around for 50 years, kind of like we all celebrate our own 50th birthdays with some big party. Well, okay, if we've reached 50. Some haven't yet. You will. But I just really invite all of our citizens, you especially, to come join us. We've had a lot of fun. We have about 80 to 85 entries right now in the parade. Should be a kick-in-the-pants odd moment for us. We don't normally shut down Highway 101 on purpose. And I'm looking forward to having some fun and patting ourselves on the back for making it this far. And then we get to move forward, looking to our future and how we're going to grow. Shoot, the comp plan is coming up. So we'll have a lot of fun. I really want you to join us.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Can you give us the address on the park that the picnic's going to be at?
The Curtis Park is on northeast 22nd Street, just east of Ace Hardware. And there will be some parking, the Seventh-day Adventist School, the Christian Church, Ocean Lake Elementary. Parking at the community center will be limited because that's where the parade ends, so we need to have room for the entries to park. But there is parking all around kind of in there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we hope.
To all of us. Okay. It is now 6:04 or 6:06 p.m. The public hearing for file PUD 2015-02 is now open. This public hearing concerns a request for final master plan and tentative subdivision for a residential planned unit development known as Olivia Beach Phase 3.
Mr. Chair, before you get to that, I think you skipped the final order, item number 5.
Oh, sorry about that. What happened here?
There's no speech to go with it. It's just, or no script. It's just.
Okay. Well, I have 2 scripts here.
It's neither of those.
It's neither of those. Okay, so I will read 5.1. Final Order 2015, File PUD 2015-03, Stoll Rivers LLP. A request for amendment to the final master plan for the Lincoln Shore Star Resort planned unit development to allow eating or drinking establishment as an additional permitted use on an existing lot, the Lincoln Shore Star Resort Lot number 61. Presently limited by the master plan to residential or condominium development. The applicant is Stephen W. Abel of Stoll Rivers LLP, and the property owner is Bank of America, N.A. Planning Commission's tentative decision is for approval.
So what you're looking for is a motion to approve the final order, or
We have a motion to approve.
discussion or changes or anything?
Is there any discussion on this?
I have one question. Okay. There's one phrase that's used over and over again several times. Anyway, and I just want clarification. Is it eating or drinking establishment, or is it eating and drinking establishment?
Eating or.
Thank you.
Well, you can do either, or both. Any further discussion? We have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve Final Order 2015-06, File PUD 2015-03.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
We need a roll count for that.
A roll call would
Yeah, we need a roll call for that, please.
All right. Griffiths,
Yes.
Hoagland,
No.
Hinton,
Yes.
Cunningham, Long,
Yes.
and Robinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Still the same reason. Don't feel that we need another restaurant in that location. They could have a hotel and have a restaurant on that property if they chose, desired.
Motion carried. All right. Now we are on to file PUD 2015-02, Final Master Plan and tentative subdivision for a residential planned unit development known as Olivia Beach Phase 3. The proposal is a residential planned unit development on 6.73 acres on the east side of Southwest Coast Avenue and south side of Southwest Bard Road. The Olivia Beach Phase 3 PUD proposes 47 lots. All lots will be developed with detached single-family dwellings. The applicant owner is Walker John, care of Olivia Beach LLC. The Planning Commission approved the preliminary master plan on July 7th, 2015. Commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the Commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? None. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner to participate in this matter? No. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the commission to consider this matter? No. Okay. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.763, parens 5. Staff will now read a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision.
The applicable substantive criteria are Lincoln City Municipal Code 1752-210Q, planned unit developments, Planning Commission consideration of the final master plan, and Lincoln City Municipal Code Title 16 subdivisions.
All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria previously listed or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in city court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the public hearing procedures, which have been adopted by the Planning Commission and City Council. A brochure outlining procedures is at the entrance to the council chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: preliminary matters and required statements, staff report, questions of staff, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, requests of continuances or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, requests to submit written argument, deliberations, and decision. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the Planning Commission has questions, your time responding to any questions will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Please present the staff report.
Thank you. This is pretty familiar to you all, I think, by this time, so I will just do a couple introductory slides and then we'll get to the criteria. This is Olivia Beach Phase 3, planned unit development, final master plan approval. This is the final master plan. As you've probably seen, this shows several changes from the preliminary to address the conditions that we put on that approval. And the applicant has presented a final master plan application that goes into great detail about, those items. So for background, on June 2nd, the public hearing on the preliminary master plan resulted in a final order on July 7th. And a list of conditions of approval. And then on July 23rd, the city received the application for the final master plan. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. This is Dune Avenue, which is part of the proposed development. This is the corner of Bard Road and Coast, southwest, and a little bit further down Coast, and that takes in most of the property that's involved. The commission has, and I should mention back here that we do have one lot that's shown on this plan that is privately owned and is not included in the subdivision or the final master plan. And this also includes the previously approved Hunter's Highland that surrounds Southwest Dune Avenue. Right now, there are 3 or 4 houses being constructed on that. Okay, so tonight we're talking about subdivision and final master plan approval. After the preliminary master plan, the next step in the process is the subdivision process if the property is to be divided into more lots. And of course, this one is. And the commission has the authority to approve a subdivision. Subdivisions over 2 acres or 10 lots go through the PUD process. And that allows us to vary the subdivision requirements for dimensions of lots and lot sizes. So really, so we don't use those as criteria at this point because the PUD then governs that. For the subdivision, though, we do need to make sure that all the utilities and streets surrounding the development are appropriate and up to standard, and that the proposed plans for this, the utilities and the streets within the development are standard. So the Public Works Department has reviewed these and feels that they are consistent, both with the preliminary master plan and also adequate. There are a couple things, I think, items that they're still working on, but they are covered by the preliminary master plan's conditions of approval, and also we will be doing a development agreement that will cover anything else. For PUDs, the Commission shall either approve or approve with conditions if the final plan meets all of the criteria, or disapprove if it does not meet all of the criteria. So even if it only does not meet one. But there aren't too many criteria for the final master plan. The first one is that it must be consistent with the preliminary master plan. And in this case, and with all conditions, in this case, the final master plan is in substantial compliance with the preliminary master plan. It meets the conditions except we have a couple things that we need to talk a little bit about this evening. One is non-native landscape plantings, and I do have a couple more related to landscape, and also the proposed revision of Condition 25. Let's see if I have planned to go into that now or later. I started the staff report before I left on a 3-week vacation, but I had not seen the landscape plan yet. Richard got the landscape plan, so he reviewed the landscape plan and finished the report. So I came back yesterday, and now I have a couple other things I want to add. So please forgive any confusion there. The conditions for approval of the preliminary master plan were in your Exhibit C, and most of them are what Richard calls prospective in their effect, meaning that they'll happen in the future. So compliance will be determined as that moves along, and that will be up to staff. The submitted landscape plan addresses here's the landscape plan. And this is the north end. And this is the new Southwest Coral Avenue, to kind of give you a framework here. And I did zoom in a little bit to show you some of the detail. But first, I just wanted to show you the landscape plan in relationship to the tracks. So these are not the individual house lots. These are the common area tracks. A common area track is not on this. It is on the other side of Dune Avenue, and it's the stairway that connects Dune Avenue with the open space. B is the park area, extends down to Coast. C is the pump station. D is this tract right here. E is Driftwood Lane, so it's an alley, basically a street. F is the stairway that extends up, connecting the Coral Avenue with Dune, and G is this, I think, let's see, is it Wayfinder? This, well, it's an easement, essentially. So, in the landscape plan, Richard noted in your report that it did not include Track D, and we got information that I believe has been distributed to your seats here on the dais that that was intentional because D has some nice Sitka trees that they would like to preserve. And so they did not want to show new landscaping because essentially they were going to retain the existing landscaping. I zoomed in on the tree plan for this area, and you can see that there are some large trees here, 22 and 23 inch in diameter, and then some trees that are about 11 or so inches in diameter. So I think that's a good intention. I think you'd probably agree because you expressed interest at the preliminary master plan level that you really would like to see native trees preserved. So the plan does, so they do mention that if that doesn't work out, to be able, that they can't preserve the trees because of the infrastructure development, that they would use similar landscaping to what is adjoining. So with that exception, the landscape plan complies with the condition of approval 20 and the requirements of LCMC 1751-100. I did have something else I wanted to add, though I thought that maybe we should have a condition that says that, that they do provide us with a plan for that tract showing that they're preserving what trees they intend to preserve, and that the condition also maybe state that what will happen if they are not able to preserve those trees, just to clarify. Okay, let's see. Otherwise, I do think that the landscape plan shows some very nice detail. This is the stairway and path winding up there. It shows maybe 4 stairs at different places along the path. It shows seating area with benches, and then the path that extends along the easement. This is the play area, park area, and it's showing a large play area, fire pit, lawn, in a nicely designed landscape. But we do have a couple other things about the landscaping. Condition number 23 in our preliminary master plan said that the street trees shall be species native to the Oregon coast and appropriate for the location. Those that are proposed are wax myrtle, Oregon green pine, and Kwanzaa flowering cherry. The wax myrtle is native. The Oregon green pine is actually a cultivar of a non-native, but with the name clearly, was either created here or has been used here. I'm not sure why the name is applied. The Kwanzan flowering cherry is an Asian tree. So that may be something that you want to address in an additional condition if you feel that those are not appropriate. Also, in condition 24, the required trees in the tracks shall be Sitka spruce, western hemlock, western red cedar, or shore pine. Now, we talked about this, and we also talked about having these native trees on individual building lots. And after we did the final order, Deanna called and said, those are really large trees, and, maybe we kind of overdid it. Because they do grow to be, a very large diameter. Most of them, the shore pine, maybe not so much, but the other ones certainly do. And so they may not, in fact, be the best. It may be too much to expect that people would want to have one on a small lot, or possibly in these tracks. Now, and we had two separate conditions, one for the individual lot trees and one for the trees in the tracks. So there again, I would like you to kind of rethink that. We did propose the conditions of approval for this final master plan for the individual lots. You may also want to do the same thing for the tracks if you feel that that these might be too large trees for that. Of course, they are preserving the Sitka, hopefully on track D, but the other ones are for the park and playground and the walking path and stairs. May be more than they can accommodate. Excuse me. The condition 26, landscaping shall include only native plants and not include any noxious or invasive plant species. Well, clearly they are including some, they're not including invasives, but they are including some non-natives, and so that is one thing that you may need to either have a condition that asks them to make native substitutions for those non-native species, or if you want to consider changing the condition on the preliminary, you can also do that. But I did make a list of all those specified in the plan that were native, and they're either North American, West Coast, North American, and the Oregon green pine tree, which I already mentioned is the cultivar of a European native. So the non-natives include all of these, and we see these around a lot. They're part of a lot of the residential landscape and commercial landscapes here in town. But if you want something that, and I believe your reasoning was that you wanted it to blend in with the open space and the natural features of the area. So that is something that I would like you to consider. Okay, so the second criteria is that all utility systems and landscaping conform to city standards or are approved by the city engineer. The city engineer has weighed in on this and says that the final master plan is in substantial compliance. However, she did call out in the proposed conditions for the final master plan that the sidewalk shall be concrete. Some of them are specified as gravel. Well, you can ask, the city engineer is here tonight, and so are the applicant and the owner, or the construction manager. Okay, so criteria C, if the final master plan is for a phase, and this is not, so I'm not even going to finish it, but this is not a phase. This is considered by staff to be a new separate PUD. And that's the process that we have used. So the applicant intends to build it as one phase, so we don't have to worry about criteria C. Okay, so that's basically the criteria. It's pretty short and sweet because we did a lot of the detail work on the preliminary master plan. I will mention that we did have an application to change the zoning from RM of this property to the new VR zone, and the city approved that, but that will not affect the subdivision. And based on the city's determination and approval, it blends in with the surrounding neighborhood. So this again is the zoning, but this RM zone is now going to be the VR. So what I'm requesting of you this evening is to complete your deliberations, including considering any of the conditions proposed by staff or any new conditions or revised conditions that you would like to make. And I would like you to specifically say what your findings are for each of the two criteria, so that when we go to do the final order, it's very clear what your thinking is. And then you can make an tentative oral decision tonight and direct staff to bring back a final order for October 6th. I think, let's see, I do have, and I can help you out when you are deliberating. I think we can go back to some of these. This is all I have for right now, but if you want to go back to some of those conditions, and I do have them listed here, those that I had in my slide presentation. So,
Would you go back to that?
Would you like me to right now?
It's right now.
Okay, so, all right, we had 25 was already mentioned. That's the one that was mentioned in the final master plan conditions. And that was the one about the individual building lots. And we proposed language substituting for the requirement that they have those large trees. We substituted language prior to receiving a final certificate of occupancy. The owner of a building lot shall plant trees and shrubs in numbers that meet the requirements of it's the landscape ordinance 1752-100G, including at least one tree of a native species. So they could choose a native tree, but of a smaller species. And that might be an alder, or it might be a shore pine. Okay? Then, in addition to that, I've asked you to consider whether you want the street trees to be, species native to the Oregon coast and appropriate for the location. And again, it's not that many that would be appropriate for street trees and also native, but there certainly are some. And so if you would rather not have the Asian tree, or, then you might want to make a finding and change a condition. The condition 24 is for the trees in the tracks. Do we want to continue to have that condition that says that the required trees in the tracks are these large native species, or are you willing to allow something else, as shown in the landscape plan or otherwise? And condition 26, landscaping shall include only native plantings and not include other noxious or invasive plant species. Again, I would like you to consider their landscape plan and whether you would like them to substitute more native species for the varieties that they have shown. And you don't have to get into the details of what those substitutions would be necessarily, but they can work with staff if you make it a condition. So, anything else? I think that was it. Yes.
Any questions for staff?
Can we ask other questions about the landscape plan?
Sure.
I was curious about the fire pit there, and I was wondering if that's an appropriate location on that hillside for a fire pit, considering it's exposed to very strong northwest winds in the summertime. Also very close to the open space area.
Okay, that's certainly a thought, especially this year. It's been so dry and we have so many fires. Maybe we'll let you talk to the applicant about that and see what their feeling is. I'm not an expert on fireplaces or if there are ways to prevent cinders from causing problems. So let's see what they say. And anything else, Steve?
No.
That was it?
Further questions? Thank you.
Yes.
Applicant's presentation, please.
Hello.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission and staff. My name is Rich Catlin. I'm a planner with Reese & Associates, working with Olivia Beach Construction, LLC. Walker John is the owner. Also with me is...
I'm Aaron Briggs with Olivia Beach Construction.
So you've heard staff's presentation. Deb and Richard have done a good job reviewing it. As she mentioned, we haven't had much of a chance to have any give and take in the last day or so on the landscape plan other than today's submittal of the email clarifying the proposed treatment of Tract D. But we would be glad to speak with you about any of the details on the landscape plan and see what resolution we can come to. So we're here to answer your questions this evening.
Questions? Steve?
We did have a condition in the preliminary master plan that the landscape plans would be native to Oregon, and as Deborah pointed out, many of the landscape plants that have been suggested by your designer are not native to Oregon. And I don't know what the feeling is here on the board is to, ask you to meet the conditions of that original plan, or maybe to accept some of the plantings. But I would certainly encourage you to plant more species that are native to Oregon, like evergreen huckleberry, salal, because that brings birds to the area. They feed on the berries those bushes produce, and it really enhances the landscape, I think, to have more native species rather than fewer.
Speak to that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and yes, there will be a lot of native incorporated into not just these tracts, but in the homes that'll be individually landscaped. When we hired a local landscape designer with Doug Spiro to help us with this, because there was a lot of things that we've learned through trial and error and a lot of error in the first two phases of Olivia Beach. We had a lot of native plants that we just couldn't get to stay alive because of the northwest winds that you were talking about earlier. And so we asked them, okay, what are some alternatives? What can we use that is familiar to the area? And he has a phrase, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what it is, but it's kind of tried and true for this area that, no, it's not native because it wasn't birthed here, but it's commonly seen around here. So we followed his recommendation with this plan. I worked with him, hand in hand, but he's the expert, and so I kind of followed his lead on that. That being said, if you feel that we need to put more native in there, we're happy to do so. One of the things that, and I understood, and I thought it might have come from you, Steve, that alders, we requested that alders were not going to be used. Is that?
That was a discussion at the preliminary master plan, and because I think the feeling was maybe they were not as good a quality a tree as the the evergreens, the conifers, but it is a native, and it is one of the deciduous trees that actually does well here on the coast.
Yeah, and maybe we, in trying to appease that, that's where the cherry tree came in.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking, okay, what is another medium growth that's not going to get wind scorched? The alders actually do get wind scorched when they grow pretty tall. So we wanted to find something that would complement that we've also used in the first two phases of Olivia Beach. Not having alders in there kind of tied our hands with a good blossoming street tree.
Yeah.
But I was also, and again, I'm not the expert when it comes to the landscape, but I was under the impression that the alders hindered the growth of the shore pines, and I don't know if that's true or not, but
I don't know, and that may be true in a forest, but not.
Yeah, I thought that was part of why we didn't include those. So that's where the cherry tree came in. It was really to try to find a substitute to an alder.
Well, I encourage the cherry. I like the cherry better than the alder. The alders spread a lot, and they're kind of dirty trees, I think.
The alders, it's a tree version of a weed. I mean, and so we were trying to find something that would enhance what we have doing, and Doug and I walked through what we did in phase 1 and 2 and said, what can we do to try to keep this same theme and the same charm that we have in phases 1 and 2, yet also try to meet the conditions. And it's a little more difficult task than what we thought. We said, okay, we want to keep this feel, but we have some limitations. So I guess on that, I'd ask you for a little variance, but if you feel that we need to go all native, we can certainly do that.
But you actually have quite a few sitka spruce and hemlock and shore pines in phase 1 and 2, correct?
Yeah, we do, and especially in the parks, and we're going to continue that theme with the parks that we have up there. We wanted to that easement walking to the park, because there really isn't driving or parking to that park. It's pretty much going to be pedestrian access only, and so we wanted to keep that trail as safe and neat and groomed as we possibly could. And so a lot of times some of the larger trees for that area, for that particular track, it's not conducive to a pedestrian path that we would have right there. Different roots could come up and branches come down.
Yeah, I think your challenge will be finding trees or bushes that are going to be resistant to that wind, because that wind is going to be very powerful.
Yes, yeah. And if I may, can I address your question about the fire pit? Doug and I did talk about that and the wind, and the reason why we put it down there on that second tier was because there was the rock retaining wall that sits behind it, kind of gives it that protection that if an ember were to blow, is going to hit that rock wall versus go on. The other thing is, we were going to do similar to what we have in the central park of Olivia Beach, is do an Escalonia screen on the northwest side of that. So it's on the back side, so that will help protect it from the winds. It does take a couple years to get it to that point, but that was our plan with doing that. If it isn't going to pan out, we'll know that really when we have all the grading and stuff down there. If it's just is not feeling like that's a place for a fire pit, we're not going to put it in. It's a good idea that on paper, but we're not going to create something where nobody's going to be able to enjoy it, and just have a pit just to have it.
Well, I think when it gets dry like it has this year anyway, I mean, the fire department, banning any open fires anyway, so.
Yeah, and I can't always speak for the homeowners association, but what they did this summer, they followed suit with the state and the city, and they banned all the burning in the existing fire pit that we had.
Yeah, what I don't want to see in landscaping is patchwork, like phase 1 and 2 look like this, phase 3 looks this way, then it's just an edge going into, the natural lands.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's ways to phase it all in 1, 2, and 3 to look the same. Then when you get to the edges, is maybe start blinging it in that way, and so there's not a definite line when you're driving by.
I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly how Doug was, that was his line of thinking as he did the design on that, because he did not, you don't want it to feel abrupt. We want it all to blend. And the challenge is blending, again, the first phases, as well as you'd have a natural open space that, I mean, we want to really tie into that and be part of that.
Are there any further questions? Thank you, sir.
Oh, wait a second. I do, and I think Deanna had one before.
Speak up.
Okay, all I want to say is that I would prefer more natives than non-natives, and however you can do that and keep your look going, that would be great. And I also would encourage you to keep as many of those native trees as possible.
Yeah, and I know we talked about a backup plan for that, the key area, that tract D.
Tract D.
And I don't feel that we're going to need a backup plan for that. We're fairly confident that we can save those trees that are on that little peninsula in that tract. And as we get into the grading, we'll find more areas that we can do the same thing. This one, Doug and I walked it, we just know it's a very easy to preserve this little strip. And so we'd like to find some more. And that really, if we can, that will help what Mr. Long was saying as far as really help tie in with what the natural area, if we can keep some of what's natural there.
And along those lines, the tree inventory misleading on Tract D. It shows just a few large trees, but keeping in mind that the inventory only includes trees larger than 6 inches, there are more than a dozen trees smaller than 6 inches that are in that same tract. So the intent is to nurture them along. We'll have to do a little bit of grading on the uphill side when we cut into the slope for coral, but most of the tract should be left untouched.
A question. The standard for removing trees to replanting trees, I had asked earlier in the process. We were going to look into that. Is there a standard of, if we have 658 trees, is there a percentage of trees that PUDs have been required? Percentage of?
Oh.
Do we have a number of trees now, the omission of the trees will be removed if we say okay?
Okay. A few years ago, our tree ordinance required replacement, and in our last revision, we tried to soften that up a bit because it just got very difficult because it was very large numbers, very costly, and didn't allow room for the actual development to occur. So now we do allow for removal of trees for development of infrastructure. And so we don't require a replacement for that. We do allow removal of trees for individual building lots at the time that a permit is issued for the building construction. And we do not require replacement, but we do have a landscape ordinance now that does require a certain number of plantings based on a square footage and a certain percentage of planting area as opposed to impervious surface area. So we don't really address it in terms of replacement. And in this case, there would a whole lot of trees, and somehow, you have to allow room for those new streets and easements and park and individual, buildings on the lot. So no, I guess I can't really answer that in the way maybe you'd like me to. I don't know the total number of trees can either one of you tell us that off of the,
There was 658 in the lot,
pardon me?
658 that they identified in the plan.
Yes.
Is there a list of trees that you have proposed to be planted?
Yeah, I was asking them if they, I think I have a number here. Maybe I can come up with a number.
These tracks are just for the common areas that we have here, and so we talked about this. Walker and I discussed it, and I think that we didn't make it a condition, but it was suggested that we put at least one tree per lot to help fill in on that hillside, and we had agreed to do that. I don't think there was anything formal about that, but
I think there is a condition on that.
we were going to put, yeah, so, I mean, we were at least one tree per lot so that it helps bring that, and if it's, there's a good chance that on the building lots themselves, there won't be a whole lot that'll be able to be preserved, because once we start clearing for the actual foundation, it does mess with the root system of those trees, but we could definitely put in one or two per lot.
I read that it said that the homeowner, before occupancy will be granted, there must be a tree that they select from the thing. I'm worried that you leave everything except for, you've cut everything down except for track D. You leave it up to the homeowner to plant the tree before occupancy is granted. So now we cut all the trees down, you put some trees in along the road here and there, and then the common areas. And so you're at like 60 trees, which is, 1% of what you took down. We had talked about. So it just seems like they'll put it in later, and then we have, 650 trees that we cut down.
Well, maybe I can interject here. We do not, our tree ordinance does not allow removal from the individual building lots. So those trees have to stay there until they get a building permit. So what they can remove is the trees that are in the way of the new street and, infrastructure.
Yeah, and the homeowners, we did the landscaping before the C of O, so we haven't really yet had the homeowner come in there and just select a tree. We could put that, I'm sure we have to turn in a landscape plan. Generally, they have us turn it in right when we request an installation inspection. They want the landscape plan turned in, and so we can make sure that, hey, in this phase, make sure that the tree is part of that landscape plan.
Go ahead.
Here we go again.
Well, I just had a quick question. We didn't see anything about irrigation on your landscape plan, and I forgot to mention that earlier, but how are you planning to irrigate? Are you going to hand water? Are you putting in a system or what?
Yeah, Doug, with these plants, if our landscape plan is granted, he said for the first 2 years they'll need irrigation. We're going to use water systems from the existing houses and work that out with those homeowners to get these firmly rooted into the ground. And then after that, the plants that he has selected aren't going to require an irrigation system.
So it'll be some kind of a tube watering system, or
it'll be most likely it'll be a hose with with rainbirds, and different, very similar to how we've done the first two phases. On Beach Avenue, we did run an irrigation system. The irrigation system within the first 3 years was undercut by roots. Kind of, it popped up. It didn't work. They do have one in the park, and we discussed putting one out there in the park. The challenge we're facing is water service to that, to that area, and so that's why we ended up on that decision.
Okay, thank you.
I would say go ahead and use alder also, because you use it in phases 1 and 2, and it looks quite attractive there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you use all the...
I would say go ahead and use alder trees in phase 3, because you use them in phases 1 and 2, and they're...
Yeah. Well, I definitely plan to use those on the houses. I agree that they can look like a weed and they can spread, but if they can also be controlled, if they're singular, you can make it a nice one. I have one in my front yard, and I like, but it's also right next to one of those cherry trees. So.
Okay, well, Deb grabbed my question. I was curious about the irrigation and how it how you did Phase 1 and Phase 2, and if it was the same, and so you already answered that question. And this one, I don't know if you can answer. Maybe the city engineer will have to, but there was a decision to change some of your gravel paths into concrete paths, and I just kind of want to know what you think about that.
I think that was referring to our initial plan along coast had gravel walks, and we acknowledged that there should be concrete. So we've already turned in our first review of construction plans, and those have been reviewed by the city engineer, and they have been changed to concrete.
And I believe the reason being is we are still going to have the gravel and the oyster shell paths like we do through the rest of Olivia Beach, but for what is actually designated as a sidewalk, that was, the ordinance, I believe, says we can't change the city standard for what they have in a sidewalk. But our little trails and the landscape steps and things that you'll see on our landscape plan, those we have every intention of using a combination of gravel and oyster shell like we did.
Oh, good.
Are we establishing a PUD today?
Well, yes.
And we can set conditions to the PUD?
Yes, we did propose 6 in Exhibit D, and the statement at the beginning says all conditions of the preliminary master plan also are still in effect. But what I am suggesting is you may need to tweak some of those if you want to allow for some of these other plantings and that kind of thing.
And as far as the VR zone for this PUD,
yes,
it applies only to this PUD, and including some of Phase 2, Phase 1?
Yes. Well, okay.
The land that's in this PUD, this Phase 3, was rezoned to VR, as was some adjacent land that's not in the PUD. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And there's also an application for rezoning Phases 1 and 2 of Olivia Beach to be in the VR zone, as well as, I think, some lots that are outside Olivia Beach as well.
And after this, we'll deliberate. Thank you.
For clarification, I just want to make sure I understand what our burden was for our application tonight. For the final master plan, our burden was to demonstrate that we've complied with the conditions of approval from the preliminary master plan, and there are no additional requirements on top of that. Is that correct?
The conditions that we put in Exhibit D just clarify and emphasize, I'd say, that what needs to be done so that it is conforming to the preliminary master plan and the conditions.
Right, because as you mentioned earlier, we covered a lot of detail with the preliminary master plan.
Yes.
And so tonight's hearing is just to check to make sure we've addressed all of those issues and questions adequately to your satisfaction.
And you saw those conditions in the 6 in Exhibit D.
And we concur with those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if you know, as we were discussing, you want to do something different with the original conditions that require the large native trees and exclude other trees, then you may want to tweak those conditions so that we're all good with that, right?
Right.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find Exhibit D.
Yes.
Help us with that.
72.
Oh, page 172. Thank you very much.
Is that PDF 172 or?
There you go. Look at that. Got it. Just take it.
Your questions?
Back to the fire pit, is there any design to actually have a water spigot close by?
That's actually a great question. There is not, but there could be.
Probably be wise to do.
Yeah.
For that,
Yeah.
conditions.
Yeah.
Idea.
That's why I get lucky.
I know.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
I wish I could say I thought of it, but
Yeah.
that's
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Testimony in support of the application, I have here Rich Caitlin. Oh, great. Do we have any testimony in opposition to the application? Others, including any testimony from representatives of public agencies, rebuttal by the applicant. ORS Section 197, 763, Paragraph 6A states that upon request, the Commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, etc.? No. All right. Is there a motion to close the public hearing and the record?
Motion, we close record and public hearing. It's PUD.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. All right. Does the staff have any comments concerning legal issues?
I think one thing you need to ask is, well, I'll ask it.
Ask.
Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record as provided in ORS Section 197.763, Paragraph 6E? He's indicating they waive it.
Thank you. All right. The matter is returned to the table for deliberations and recommendation. Ladies and gentlemen, what's your favor?
Do we want to look at the conditions, go to, I think, starting condition 23, 24, I think it was 26, discuss each condition and come with a consensus of all commissioners?
For me.
Could we get that on the screen again, the wording for those conditions?
Or should we just start at 1 and see if we agree to those? Because number 2 says no vacation rentals, so we're clearly going to allow that.
Okay, let's see here.
So we got to talk about that, too, is we just made 47 new BRDs.
I'm not sure I actually had the conditions listed on here.
We can submit conditions that they can't have more than, like we did.
Okay.
Well, I think number 2 was actually written up before it was turned into a VR, so.
There it is, but we're still establishing a
we got-
PUD. For the establishment of the PUD, we can make a PUD requirement not changing the VR zoning. So where we before felt 5 bedrooms in Rhodes End is okay and not 6.
Well, that's part of the VRD standards of licensing,
Not part of the PUD.
not part of the PUD.
Make it.
That's a characteristic of the VR zone.
Basically, you have 2 criteria to look at. One is the applicant referred to this, is the final master plan consistent with the preliminary master plan? And I think generally we would all say that it's in substantial compliance. It looks basically the same, is what I'm saying. Then the second part of that is, and does it meet all the conditions? So we do need to go back to the preliminary master plan conditions. I mentioned a couple that I wanted you to look at and see if you wanted to change. If there's something else there, yes, but we don't open it up to a discussion of, you know, of other things at this point. And then the second one, B, is whether or not we think that well, now we're getting into something, the other conditions. The second part of that is whether or not it meets, there. All utility systems and landscaping conform to the city standards or approved by the city engineer. And the city engineer finds that the final master plan is in substantial compliance except for that one item of the sidewalks being concrete. And we also, as I mentioned, are doing a development agreement. That's a staff function, and we will make sure that the development agreement covers anything else, and as far as actually getting the project completed.
So Riley brought up a good question. Do we need to change the wording on number 2 in the general requirements? Because that says actually saying no vacation rentals use, well, only as allowed by city ordinance.
Well, we could, but the city ordinance for the new VR zone does allow for VRD use. So it's...
That's enough to...
So you can get rid of it, or, you know, I mean, it's not, I think it would still allow, it would not prohibit it.
Are you saying that there's a condition of approval that says no VRDs?
It says VRD use only as allowed in the city ordinance. By city ordinance.
Then they would be allowed?
They are allowed in the VR zone.
Yeah.
What was your question, really?
I was talking.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Do we want to go back to 23 and look at that?
Okay. Where is 23? I'm sorry, I seem to have lost it. Okay, there we go. So
what you said earlier was some of the native species potentially grow too large for that space.
well, in this case, this one is a little more flexible than some of them because it doesn't call out particular species. This talks about native species. Do you want to consider the wax myrtle or the Oregon green pine to be native species? Do you want to not allow Quonset flowering cherry? Do you, or would you rather have them substitute alders for the cherries, for example? Okay, so that's, I'm just asking you to take another look at this and see if that's really what you still want it to say.
Well, I think the proposed trees need to be consistent with the condition, so I think we need to change that condition if we want more of a mix. So something along the lines of street trees shall be predominantly species native to the Oregon coast or suitable, or other trees suitable for this particular location. That would enable the developer to include those other trees.
Well, and so I'm asking your intent. Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, I kind of feel really mixed about this. I understand how some trees don't do very well, some because they're by themselves and they'd rather be grouped, and two, because of the wind, and but my other thinking is that proposed list, that's kind of short. Are there other trees that would work? Was this your list, or was this?
This is the list that is provided in the plan as it is now.
Right, and who made the list?
The applicant's landscape designer.
Okay.
Does the city have a landscape designer or something like that that could tell whether or not these are sufficient or equal in terms of what the initial proposal was versus now this one person's landscaper? This is what we want for one person.
We don't have a landscape architect on staff. We do have landscape guides that we've prepared that for trees, and then another one for shrubbery and another one for ground cover. And those include plants that we think are appropriate for the coast and that will do well, and we're kind of recommending those. That's not to say that it's, exhaustive and that there aren't others. Some of these are actually, some of the plants listed that aren't native are actually in our guides. Not all of these, but I noticed a few of them were in our guides, but they're not native. So,
could we make a recommendation that the shrubs and the trees follow the city's guides?
Yes, you can.
Something that's already been established that other development could follow versus this landscaper said this landscaper said that, and now everyone's doing, well, this is what we said is the best thing versus the standard of the city.
When we did those guides, Timothy, who's the one who prepared them, went around and talked to some of the landscape people in town to try to get a sense of, what would be the best things to put in the book. And, and we do have some good suggestions in there. Like I said, I'm not saying that there aren't other trees that also would be appropriate. I think that maybe what Steve offered, predominantly native or others proven to be appropriate or something like that, may be a good way to do that without being overly restrictive, if you're willing to allow some non-natives.
Maybe also consistent with the plantings in phases 1 and 2, which include more native species than that.
Now, I'm kind of in favor of saying the trees shall be species native to the Oregon coast and appropriate for the location as a requirement.
Just leaving it the way it is in the preliminary master plan.
Personally, I think this developer has shown good sense in the past. Mm-hmm. He's shown good sense through this entire process. And I'm just kind of thinking maybe this whole discussion about what kind of trees is going a little overboard here.
Well, I think that sentence, though, says those trees have to be native. And what I think we need to do with that first sentence is open it up a bit so they can plant stuff.
That's a good idea.
That's what I'm suggesting.
So maybe street trees shall be species native to the Oregon coast and appropriate for a location, also including wax Oregon, green pine, the flowering cherry.
Non-native species, yeah.
Non-native species that are viable to the Oregon coast.
Okay, I'll tell you what, when I do the final order, I think I have a sense of where we're going, and I will write something that hopefully covers your points.
Deanna?
Predominantly natives.
Okay.
That's fine, yeah.
Good.
All right.
Moving on to the next condition, please.
Condition 24. Was kind of the same issue. We had said in the tracks that they had to restrict it to these large natives. And again, shall we soften that up and say something similar to 23?
I don't think so.
Oh, you want to have?
No.
What's your?
I feel that those tracks should be left alone. I understand that you want to make them safe to walk through and everything like that, but removing them all to plant some other trees, I think, is just a little too much.
And I also want to say we heard from those guys back there that they're fine the way they are. I know specifically about D, track D, I think Rich was talking about, but I don't think there's any reason to change this.
To change the condition.
No.
Don't change the condition.
No reason to pull out a bunch of trees so you can put in Sitka spruce, I think is what I'm hearing.
Well, they are Sitkas that are existing predominantly, I think. But, okay, so, excuse me. Now, this is the landscape plan shown for the play area and park. And in, maybe I can tell you even, in B, letter B here. So to have a play area and a lawn, clearly you have to remove some trees. I'm just, I'm not arguing with you, I'm just, want to make sure so what they are showing here, they're showing a couple trees here, a couple trees here, trees up here that would probably not be the size of a Sitka spruce. Although, maybe you can, well, I don't know how to advise you there. I guess it's up to you guys.
They don't remove trees if you don't. Sure.
Well,
You need to come up here.
Yeah.
What you'll need to do is reopen the hearing.
Oh,
No, sir.
I just want to let you know that pathway.
Can't.
And you're allowed to reopen the hearing, you just need a motion to do it if you want to do that. So. And you may want to reopen it for the duration of your deliberation so you can ask these kinds of questions.
You guys feel?
You have the deliberation during an open hearing.
We probably need to have.
Okay, make a motion.
Reopen the hearing.
Second? Second? No second. So, moving on.
okay, all right.
Back
Well,
to 24.
okay, so, what would you like? Would you like to leave it the way it is, or would you like me to change it?
Is the park considered infrastructure? And if the park is considered infrastructure, then they could remove it for that purpose and the lawn.
Yes. I would say so, yes.
So then we could say, yes, the park is great and the lawn is fine, and we could remove it for those purposes only if that's, infrastructure.
And for the easement and for,
Is that, if I'm reading it right, that they will not. And that's to the planning director.
Yeah, I think it'd be a stretch to say it's infrastructure. When we think of infrastructure, we're talking about streets, sidewalks, storm drainage, water and sewer.
Can we amend
And
that
the
to say
utilities.
play structure and lawn?
what is
Actually,
it,
it might be
what
best to
what is,
just be explicit and say what you want to say.
yeah,
You could remove the trees to make the park and the lawn
It's,
in that track, because we're saying you can't remove any trees in the track. However, they have this common area in the track. We want them to have the common area. We want them to have that thing. So you can't say, you can't remove any, and then say, you have to put this in there. How do you do that? So you could remove the trees for the park and the lawn.
okay. I think the tree ordinance will govern what trees can be removed for what purposes. So I don't think we really need to do that. What this condition was indicating is that any new trees would be of those species, of those large species. So, that's what I'm asking. Do you want to allow them to use some other trees other than those, the Sitkas and the hemlocks and so forth?
What about other native deciduous trees?
All right. I'm open to that.
Okay. Shall we just say native trees, period?
Yep.
Would that be okay?
Simpler.
Oregon, coastal Oregon. These are native to China.
Okay. Native to Oregon coast. Okay.
Moving
So we
on.
ready to move on?
Yes.
26, right?
Okay. In 26, landscaping shall include only native plantings and not include any noxious.
What about putting in predominantly there?
Okay, shall include predominantly native. All right, thank you.
Can we say like 2 trees? I mean, there's, one is the little, I mean, we're talking about the possible removal of 658 trees.
This is not, we're on 26.
I'm reading it. They have to plant at least one native tree on building lot, right?
No.
Oh, that is another one. That's number 25.
Oh.
And number 25, we also, we're already changing in Exhibit D, and it was to change the requirement for individual building lots, so that it says that before receiving final occupancy, the owner of the building shall plant trees and shrubs in numbers that meet the requirements of a number, and that's our landscape ordinance, including at least one tree of a native species. So that steps up from our tree ordinance to require the native species. And then, the last thing, we don't have to include anything about the irrigation system. Do you want to ask that the revised plan shows includes Track D, shows a plan for Track D, which would be the preservation of those Sitkas?
Yes, I'd like to see that.
Okay, so we'll add that one. And do you want to add a condition about the water spigot?
I would.
Okay. All right, then, I think I understand.
Is there general agreement on those? I'm hearing Commissioner Long, but...
Yes.
Yes.
You have to speak up. Be loud.
Is there, for 29, it says to the specification of North Lincoln Sanitary Service. Would it be wise to say the current city garbage service and not specifically that company? Will, at a later date, if they got bought out or changed businesses, would it have to be, the PUD be amended?
Well, I think by then the streets will be constructed, correct? I'm not sure exactly how that reads.
Each unit shall have its own trash receptacle or receptacles to the specifications of North Lincoln Sanitary Service.
Okay,
The
we could
development
change
shall
it.
not utilize dumpsters.
Okay, we could do that.
It could be to the standards of the franchise holder. So.
That's a good idea.
Okay, we'll do that.
Wouldn't have to change.
Just say sanitary service is fine.
To sanitary service, that's, all right. Anything else?
Can I get a clarification on 16, condition 16? No construction associated with the development shall take place on legal holidays, Saturdays, or Sundays. Does that apply for all phases of that development, from building the roads to building the new homes that people buy? Okay, it does.
That's what you would like to have it, I can clarify that, so that it, if you want it to all phases of development. Now, just to go back, so I want to make sure now so that our criteria, are you in agreement with that the development proposal as conditioned meets the criteria for subdivision, and also, whoops, there we go, for preliminary master plan, consistent for the PUD, for the it's consistent with the preliminary master plan, and it will be consistent with all conditions as revised. And the second one is that.
Let's answer the first one.
Oh, okay.
Are we all in agreement with that? Go ahead.
Yes, okay. And all utility systems and landscaping conform to city standards or are approved by city engineer. And that, I guess, something that you're going to have staff.
Take that on faith, won't we?
Okay. Yes.
Do we want to have Deborah read back the conditions so we can nod in unison?
I'll tell you what, how about if I bring them in a final order, and that will be your
Sounds
chance
good.
to
Thank
make
you.
sure I did it right.
Very much,
That'll give me a
Deborah.
little time to work on them.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Deborah, are you saying that they won't make a motion tonight for approval?
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I understand what they want, and I'll work on this exact wording and put it in the final order.
And we will have an opportunity to tweak that when you present it if
it's
Yes,
wrong.
if it's wrong.
If it's wrong. If you want, I can do my best to read back what you want. Would you like me to?
I'm seeing a lot of shrugs, so I'd say
Okay.
no.
So no?
No.
You need to speak into the microphone.
One of us.
Oh, so sorry. Perhaps just for the record, so it's clear for everybody,
Reprise.
you can
Okay.
summarize what you'll be putting into exact language
Okay.
for next.
We're
for the
changing
final order.
changing condition number 23 to street trees shall be predominantly species native to the Oregon coast or others proven to be appropriate for the location, consistent with Phase 1 and Phase 2. Condition 24 is required trees and tracks shall be native to Oregon. Number 26 will be landscaping shall include predominantly native plantings and not include any noxious or invasive plant species. The revised plan shall include Track D and a plan for Track D, and the developer shall place a water spigot next to a fire pit.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. Deliberation and vote.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, we need a motion.
I move to approve
Master plan,
final master plan for Phase 3 of Olivia Beach,
subject to the revised conditions.
subject to the revised conditions.
I second the motion.
Roll call, please.
And did that also include the preliminary subdivision?
Yes.
Okay. Griffiths,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Hoagland,
Yes.
and Robinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. It's now 7:28 p.m. The public hearing is now open to allow public comment regarding adoption of the Lincoln City Transportation System Plan. The 2015 Transportation System Plan is a guide for Lincoln City to use in developing and maintaining its transportation network through 2035. The State of Oregon requires Lincoln City to have a transportation system plan that is consistent with the statewide transportation system. Planning Commission's role in this process is to consider any written or oral comments or testimony as well as information from staff and present a recommendation to the City Council, who will hold additional public hearing. City Council may adopt the Planning Commission recommendation, may adopt a different recommendation, or may take other action. The applicable criteria by which the plan will be evaluated by the Planning Commission, the City Council, are conformity with the statewide planning goals, Goal 12 in particular, conformity with the unamended portions of the comprehensive plan goals, policies and land use map, and the applicable provisions of the Lincoln City Municipal Code. Appeals to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, are limited to persons who have presented written and/or oral testimony at the hearings before the Lincoln City Planning Commission and/or City Council. Failure to raise an issue at public hearings in person or by letter, or the failure to provide sufficient specificity to allow the Planning Commission and/or City Council an opportunity to respond to the notice of public hearings issue, precludes an appeal to LUBA on that issue. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone. Begin by stating your name only. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Staff, please present its report.
Okay, I'm going to begin and then turn it over to John. But I just want to say as an introduction that we've been working on this for a long time. The city has needed an updated transportation plan for years, and we have been frustrated in our attempts because we have to have it approved by ODOT, and it was very generous of ODOT a few years ago when we reached an agreement on the new highway improvement that's nearing completion. They offered to help the city a complete transportation system plan. And they have provided us with DKS and Associates, and John Bosquet, who's sitting beside me, is the lead engineer on this project, and he's been working with us over the past 3 years, and ODOT's staff has been very supportive, the Region 2 planner, our area planners, and engineers there. And so it's nice to be able to bring you a draft TSP, a final draft, and I'm going to let John, you've already seen John, and I think the planning commissioners, most of you have seen his presentation, but because this is a public hearing, he's going to provide some basic information about what's in the plan for the people who may be here in the audience or certainly at home. So I'm going to turn it over to John. Thank you.
I'm John.
Thanks. Good evening. As Deborah mentioned, this would be Lincoln City's, I guess, first adopted transportation system plan. And again, we've some of the struggles in the past have been getting a plan that's compliant and recognized by ODOT and DLCD. And thus far, we've had ODOT and DLCD on our advisory committee, and they're both verbally supportive of the plan in its current form. So in that regard, we're in good shape. What I want to do here is give an overview of the TSP itself and the process that we went through. And again, if you saw this presentation before, go ahead.
Could we dim the lights, please? Thank you.
All right. This will be similar to the presentation I gave at the joint workshop with Planning Commission and City Council with some new information. Again, after that meeting, we took some of the comments that we got from Planning Commission and City Council, incorporated that. We also had a public meeting and got some more feedback and incorporated that again. So there have been some minor revisions here and there to the last draft. Again, why do you want a transportation system plan? For one, it is required by the state that you have one by administrative rule. And so this would be Lincoln City's first state compliant or recognized plan. Obviously, there are a lot of benefits other than just having to do it. To do this, it really helps you gauge what your overall needs are over the next 20 years as you continue to grow, both what your current transportation needs are and how those might change. It's an opportunity to have a discussion about priorities in transportation funding and how transportation funding aligns with your needs, and it's an opportunity to have a conversation about what you might want to do differently with regards to funding. I'll talk about funding quite a bit, but just one thing I want to note is you do not have to resolve any funding decisions as part of the adoption of the TSP. It's a good time to have that conversation. A lot of communities do afterwards, is then they will, after adoption of the TSP, they'll pick up that discussion about funding options if they want to change what they're currently doing. It's also a good way to make sure that if you've got a comprehensive plan, obviously the work we've done in the TSP aligns with all the planned land use for the next 20 years. And so make sure that transportation and land use are staying in sync. And it just helps you prioritize and figure out where you need to spend your money to get the most bang for the buck. Another one, the last one on here, is very, very important. It's usually a very key piece in applying for state or federal grants to show that you have that project in an adopted plan. It demonstrates to them that it's quote unquote project ready and that there's local support for it. So there's much lower risk of them giving you the funding and then the whole project falling apart. So the process we went through, again, it has been 3 years. We started out in fall of 2012. Around that time, we were working on some of the initiation steps. We worked with our project advisory committee, that's the PAC there that's listed, to discuss what they wanted to get out of the plan, what the kind of vision for transportation was, what kind of goals we should have and what we want to accomplish to kind of set some direction for us as we work through the plan. Then we, in the summer, we shifted into, or we were working on transportation needs, I guess, from that point, looking at what are the current deficiencies, what's working well, then projecting out, 20 years, looking at what your projections are for housing and employment and how that's going to affect transportation growth, and, what would change from the existing conditions to the future. And we came back in the summer of 2013. We met with our technical advisory committee, which I can't remember all the representation now. I think they are listed in the plan. That was our agency advisory committee. So they kind of provided the policy and regulatory sideboards for us. And also met with our project advisory committee to go over and kind of confirm what we were seeing were the issues. We also had our first public event at that time to get some more feedback on that. And then we took that and we moved into the solutions development stage. We spent quite a bit of time there. We actually had 2 different check-ins with our advisory committee. One was kind of a midway through preliminary check-in before we got too far down the road with anything, to get their responses to the types of solutions we had in there, to give us a little direction. Also, again, it was another meeting with our technical advisory committee. Once we had a draft solution set, we had our second project advisory committee meeting, another public event, and at that time we also did a joint Planning Commission City Council meeting to share what the draft solutions were, what the advisory committees were telling us, and got some further input from that group. Then just this summer, we produced our draft transportation system plan, the first draft. Again, through both of our committees, got some good feedback from them. They're both very supportive of the plan. We didn't have a lot of changes. Had a handful of comments they had, which we've incorporated now. We came back and had another joint meeting with Planning Commission City Council. Again, shared the draft plan, got more input. And then did our last public event, which was our most successful of the 3. I think we had over 40 comment forms filled out, which was helpful. And we incorporated as much of that input as we could. And now here we are, finally starting the adoption process. So hopefully soon we'll be going to City Council. It's kind of the highlight of the TSP. That's the table of contents there, and kind of it gives you background in it. Talks about the process we went through, some of the key trends we found, as far as what's happening today and what's projected to happen in the future. One thing I will note, I think there was some confusion the last time we were here about what Volume 1 and Volume 2 might have been, because there are 2 volumes of the TSP. Volume 2 is the appendix. And obviously, as we go through that process I showed you, we're doing work and we're producing a number of reports and memos of different milestones. But as we get feedback from the public and work with city staff and Planning Commission City Council, those things continue to evolve. So it's kind of an archive of where we had been. It's not necessarily going to align with what is in Volume 1, because some things did change the further we got down the road. So really, you're adopting Volume 1 as the TSP. The rest of it is really for reference and background if somebody wanted to go back and see how we got to where we did. A couple of key parts of the TSP. One is the vision, which there's a section there where there are a number of goals and objectives. They gave us guidance on what we were being told was important and things we wanted to accomplish. That's going to evolve into a number of recommended policies and code amendments that match or kind of come from those goals. I don't want to ruin my last slide, so cover your ears if you don't want a spoiler. We're usually, a lot of times we go through and we adopt those together. We'll say, here's the TSP and here's the policy and the code amendments. For this process, we wanted to spend some more time working with staff through some of the code amendments, so we're actually separating them. There will be a subsequent set of hearings to deal specifically with policy and code amendments. So right now, it's just the TSP. The other part is obviously the plan itself, which is the big list of projects. Now, I'll show briefly kind of an overview of that. And then the standards section, which covers things like street functional classification, so what should be an arterial versus a collector and a local street, and guidance on how those should be managed. So they're in street standards, so obviously a local street is designed like a local street. And a number of other things like guidance for traffic calming programs, access spacing standards, and mobility targets. And the key with the standards piece is obviously to help the city as new facilities get built, or if any modifications are proposed to existing ones, that we make sure that they're going to be designed and operated to serve their intended function. So we talked about funding quite a bit, and as you get in and look at the project list, which I believe they're in Table 1, they start on page 27 in the draft plan. The key part of that is there's a tiered system, or package as we call them, so it's numbered 1 through 4. And what those were really doing was it was kind of a budgeting exercise. It does give some indication to priority, but really budget is the controlling factor. Because obviously there's a lot of things that we'd want to do, and there might be some projects that are of very high value, but they also might be incredibly expensive and would cost far more than we think we're really going to have to spend. And so what we did as part of this process, we looked at the city's past trend of where they get their transportation revenue, and assuming that maintained relatively the same over the next 20 years, how much you might have to spend on new capital projects. And that came to around $2.5 million. Obviously, that's not a hard number. It's just 20-year budgeting here. In addition to that, ODOT did the same thing for their transportation revenue, and looked at how much they think they might have. Again, not holding them to it, but over the next 20 years, 4 projects in Lincoln City, similar to the ones that they're doing now. Their estimate was somewhere in the range of $5 to $10 million. And so we took that and we called that our financially constrained plan. And so really what we're doing is saying, what do we think are the highest value projects based on what the public is telling us and the committees are telling us that we could actually pay for that much money. And so those were called our Tier 1 projects. Then it's just kind of an exercise that might be useful in following discussions about funding options. We said, well, okay, let's make a second package that says, what if the city added a new revenue stream and doubled the amount of transportation revenue you would have over the next 20 years? So add another $2.5 million. How much more could we build? And then package 3 was the same as, okay, what if we got another $2.5 million, whether that was bonding for $2.5 million to do a specific set of projects or whatever it ends up being. And that was Tier 3, and anything that was left was just called Tier 4. One important note is that the tiering system here does not bind anyone to building, package 1 projects first. As opportunities arise, whether it's a grant, whether a new development comes in, whatever might happen in the future, you can still spend your money where it makes sense. So you can do a Tier 4 package 4 project first if it just turns out to be that way. But this at least provides some initial guidance on where you might want to go first with the money that we're probably going to have. So quickly kind of looking through the project types, we have a pretty good balance of projects. One thing you'll probably notice is we're not building a lot of big new roads. I mean, for one reason, there's not a lot of places to build them. It's a pretty constrained area, but also they're expensive, and so we're going to be fairly judicious with where we're trying to build new roads. And we really wanted to spread the funding out amongst, transit and bicycle and pedestrian, and projects that help manage the transportation system and don't just add more concrete and asphalt, which often tends to be more inexpensive ways to get more out of the infrastructure that you already have. And so these are just some of the ones I'm highlighting on the screen here are actually some of the Tier 1 transit projects. They're not all the transit projects. In fact, one I just want to note, it's probably the one we got the most feedback on. We got quite a bit of feedback on it at the last public event in regards to transit. was the need for extended service hours and service on Sundays. It's not in the Tier 1 only because of the cost. It would, to do that, and we just threw out a hypothetical, what if you added 4 more hours to the day? So you had service out to 9:45 and service on Sunday, and we took a rough estimate at what the additional operational cost would be. And it's more than you're going to have over 20 years, by far. And maybe there's variations of that that make sense, that cost less money, but I just want to note that that was, I think, a pretty high priority project that a lot of people would like to have. It just didn't fit within the funding. Similar with the demand management projects, again, just showing some of the ones that we put in Tier 1. There's a new project up there that we replaced since the last time I was here. And that was, we added a program for putting in bicycle and pedestrian wayfinding signing in the city. And then with the driving projects, driving, walking, and biking, and these graphics kind of split the city up into 3 different quadrants. I can always come back to these later. There's a lot of projects. I thought what I would do is, and again, these didn't change a lot since the last draft, which has been online, which we showed it to the public at the last event, and went into a bit more detail at the joint meeting. So I wanted to kind of highlight actually some of the key changes instead of going through all of them individually. One thing, there was a number, and this was in the staff report too. There was a table provided, I think that you got, hopefully. There were a number of projects that were just moved between tiers, and I won't go through all of those, because again, it showed a little bit of prioritization, but that doesn't mean you can't go back to any project at any time. Some of the more important ones were, we added under the driving projects, a radar speed feedback sign on US 101 in Cutler City. So this would be going northbound. So as you're coming in to help manage some of the speeding problems as people are, coming into an urban area. We also added, I think it's actually still on the screen here, this in the older draft, a new road connection, which will be, I think, pretty important for maintaining connectivity as that area continues to develop. And so we don't force everyone up and down constantly back to the highway. It was in there as a circulation study only. That was one that kind of bounced back and forth throughout the project. And through some of the conversations I had through the last round of meetings, we decided, we left the study in there because maybe there's still some discussion needs to happen and refinement. We thought it was really important to get the project on the map, even if it's a line with some uncertainty, because that gives the city a lot more ability to start, preserving right-of-way and working with developers or collecting funds for it, through SDCs. If we don't do that and it's only a study, I don't think you're going to be able to do that, and you might miss a huge opportunity, or it might, become, blocked or cost prohibitive. So we've changed that and made sure that, that is a road project now on the map. Another one that we've added in here, I think the 2 big things I heard from the last public event, one was the transit, improvement that I mentioned, more service hours. The other one was definitely Ocean Lake, and that was something we looked at in quite a bit of detail through our committee meetings. We looked at several different alternatives for ways you could reconfigure US 101 through Ocean Lake. Obviously, you're not getting more right-of-way there, and so there's trade-offs involved. Through all those meetings, we really got no resolution or agreement on anything different than what was there today. So I guess no one was certain if it was willing giving up something else, where that was parking or trading off bike lanes or the ability to turn. But the big one that came up through the last public event was, a lot of people were saying, hey, how about no left turns? We don't need to turn left through that stretch. Just shut them off. Maybe even seasonally. Just in the summertime. So what we did, because clearly the important thing there is, I'm sure we could do that, and operationally we could make it work for the highway users. It really comes down again to us, I think it's a local discussion on the acceptability of different trade-offs, and if it's worth it to Lincoln City to not be able to turn left for 3 months out of the year in that stretch to improve highway traffic. So what we did is we put in, basically it's a refinement study for Ocean Lake, especially to have that conversation locally with the residents and the business owners in there that may be most affected by some of those trade-offs. Now, I already mentioned the addition of the bicycle and pedestrian wayfinding signing. We added that. And I think that was actually the last major change that was made. I think everything else was minor editorial things and just some modifications of the prioritization in some places with the different packages. So I'll skip to my last slide, which I've kind of already covered. This is again, will be coming, the policy amendments and the code amendments that would help implement the TSP. Again, a lot of those will come from the goals and objectives that we worked out with the advisory committee. Some of them are going to be additions recommended by the consultant team just for best practices on how to manage the transportation system. Some of them are going to be to make sure that you're compliant with the most current state regulations. So there's a mix of those. Again, we're still working through some of the ones that aren't required, some of the recommendation ones, and making them fit Lincoln City with staff and make sure we're comfortable with that before we come forward. The important thing there is it's incredibly important to follow through after this TSP adoption and get the policy and code amendments adopted, because without that, you really don't have a lot of teeth as a city to implement your transportation system plan. It really needs the backing of the code and policy. But hopefully that's coming soon. I think that ends my presentation of the TSP, so I'll take it back to you for questions.
Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, questions?
You have signs in the city that say show intent when trying to cross the road, and these signs that are wayfinding signs for pedestrians and bicycle users. I'm wondering if those can be also in Spanish.
It could, yeah. There's no reason you couldn't do that.
Oh, I wonder if I could just mention, we had a local project management team that included Lila Bradley, Public Works Director, and Richard Townsend, the Planning and Community Development Director, Stephanie Reed, our City Engineer, who's in the audience this evening, and me. And in addition to DKS, we had Angela Planning Group who worked on the proposals for the policy and code amendments. So we'll be hearing from her again as we move to that phase.
I have a question for you. I'm curious, could you explain a little bit about the level of service, LOS, and what that means, and why the plan is recommending E? That's kind of close to the bottom of the barrel, and I was wondering why E instead of a higher classification.
Sure. So the level of service, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like a report card where A is really good and F is bad, and it relates to delay, it's the amount of delay you experience. So level service A means at an intersection, typically, you wouldn't experience much delay at all, maybe less than 10 seconds on average. Whereas at level service F, it's closer to a minute. It's like a level service E, maybe it would be 50 seconds. A D, maybe 40-ish, something like that. And so currently the city doesn't have any mobility standards. So, if development comes in, you get an impact study, there's really nothing to gauge it against as far as, adequate facilities with regard to congestion. Other cities, mobility standards really vary. Some are as low as D, very, very rarely see anything lower than that. They could range to be much higher. And really what it becomes is kind of it's a balancing act. It's kind of a tolerance for congestion, like how much, do we really want to put up with? But it's also kind of, again, that reasonableness and the funding part of it. And do we think that we can afford, that level of convenience? Or what a lot of cities can consider is again, it's how much burden would be on development, and is it reasonable, given how much congestion we think we're going to have, to maintain a certain standard. You could make it D if you wanted. You could make it more lenient and go to F for an hour of the day. Like I said, it's really a city preference. I think the E was our recommendation. And again, that only applies to the city streets, where currently it's as far as your congestion problems go, it's nothing compared to the highway. And so ODOT has their own mobility targets they're going to apply to the highway. So these are really just for off-highway facilities. And given that you don't have any traffic signals off the highway that I'm aware of, this would be a two-way stop-controlled intersection. So it would be saying, maybe instead of over the next 20 years, if I'm stopped at a stop sign, I need to turn out during the busiest part of the day, do I want to allow for 40 seconds of delay on average or 50? That's kind of roughly what it comes down to.
Do you have a sense of what Lincoln City is experiencing today in the LOS?
I'm not aware of any places in the city today off the highway that have any real significant congestion problems that I've seen, whether that's any work that we've done or just being in the field, making observations, or even after reviewing a couple of impact studies. And I don't know if you've seen anything different through impact study review, but that's been my take on it.
Thank you.
I have a question. The crosswalk that's down there at 37th, I think, 37th North, something like that. Was there a plan that there was going to be 2 more of those put in, or did I catch that in the previous discussion you had? Was flashing yellow?
Yeah, there are a number of enhanced pedestrian crossing treatments on the highway in the TSP. So I don't know if you knew you're asking about plans, if you're talking about something more imminent, like it's funded and they're coming next year, or just in the TSP?
I thought in the TSP we discussed having 2 more, one at the fire station in the southwest or south.
Yeah, there were several, and they are included in our list of projects. I'm not sure exactly where they fall within that. Do you know, John? Or Stephanie, maybe? They're all
if not all, most of them are. Yeah, that was one of the, because they're relatively inexpensive compared to a lot of other things, and it was, again, one of the kind of the higher priority concerns that were expressed, and so it was kind of a good fit for the Tier 1 projects. But they're literally, we have them all up and down the highway.
Is it one on Logan Road similar to the one that's on the 37th Street? The one on Logan Road I know has been run over and it's just kind of screwed to the ground, where the one on 37th is an actual thing, and so which kind of pedestrian notification will it be? One that's easily run over or one that's a little bit more substantial?
Probably not easily run over. They vary in design. If you go to a Volume 2, I believe we actually have concept drawings for every crossing treatment that's recommended. You're not held to that exact drawing. It's really more of a guidance on what we think would be a good fit for that location. And a lot of them are a mix of, because it's the highway, we can't put a little thing that's going to get run over in real temporary. A lot of them are more substantial, where it might be an addition of a concrete island so you can have a 2-stage crossing. Some of them have the yellow flashing beacons, like you have up at the north end of town. So there's kind of a mix of treatments, but they're probably more substantial than that.
Does undergrounding power lines fall into this?
It does not.
Talk about millions.
Hey,
I'm
going to ask.
I'd love it.
What about police cameras on the lights?
That could.
To potentially offset the cost of a extended hours for the transportation system. Having 2 in town, one at the north end, one at the south end.
So you're talking about like red light running enforcement?
You go past the red light, you get a ticket in the mail.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could be in the plan.
To offset some kind of cost for the not available transit.
Yeah, I think if that's what you want to get out of it, you may not see those kind of results. It depends where the money goes. Yeah.
There's probably some stipulations where it would go.
Generate more revenue, buy more crosswalk signs.
Well, something, but if this was part of the transportation safety plan and you had red light cameras that you're going to get a ticket in the mail because you're running red lights and we're trying to be more safe, could be effective.
I didn't understand the relationship between that and
Because the number one,
transit.
because the number one thing he said was having extended hours and service on Sundays, which we can't get. And if we had a way to increase revenue, i.e. police cam,
Maybe we
flashlight,
could. I see.
if there was part of that. I don't know, I'm sure there's a stipulation to say where the money goes. But ideally, if you were bringing money in, you could maybe use money for somewhere else. I don't know. Hey, I'm going to ask.
Ask away.
Yeah, I would just have to, I could check and see
sure.
if that were to happen, if there's like I said, if the money has to go back into enforcement, or if you lose
Right.
a huge percent of that through processing, you may not actually get much revenue back.
They're paid by the general fund, I believe, so, but anyway, that's there. Okay.
Questions?
Okay. First of all, well done.
Thanks.
It's a lot of work. So did you start with the project and now you're ending with it?
I did, yes.
That's amazing. Good for you. Stick-to-itiveness. And I just want to say it's good outreach that was done, and to Stephanie for doing a neighborhood meeting, which was really appreciated. Thank you very much. And also congratulations on your open house at the farmers market. You got quite a bit of people stopping in, and that's what you want. And congratulations for that too. And I just want to tell you also a little bit of frustration I had, and I think I've mentioned this before, but just in trying to track the projects from one iteration of the plan to the next, the numbering system, like B1 would stay B1, but the description would change. It's like, well, where'd it go? And it's just, I have some time to review all this stuff, but it would have made it easier than me trying to find it, find where it went. But anyway, just for the future, you might want to keep like a tracking or ID number with the actual project name. And I realize that some of these you fused together or gathered together under a different type of description, and I get that. Also, I know that there was a suggestion made for a new parking lot next to the state park, and there's some comments in the somewhere in here. I think the report, the staff report, and I'm just curious if there's any support from the staff, or have you had a chance to talk about that for an additional parking lot at the state park at Rhodes End State Park?
Yeah.
And while she's walking up here, the reason for this, for those who don't know, is that, especially in the summer, but there is so much traffic there. The current parking lot is overfull. I know it's a state park situation, but the parking lot becomes overflowing onto the neighboring streets, and then you have a pedestrian problem because they just dart out between cars. They're so excited to be at the beach. And anyway, it's just kind of a hazard. I was just wondering what you...
And I talked with Lila Bradley, the Public Works Director, and what we're doing right now is we're meeting with the state parks and looking at all of the state parks in the city. So it won't be a TSP project per se, but it'll be a state park effort, and we are definitely looking at that.
Oh, great.
Parking lot.
So I worry every time. Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful news. And then I'm trying to track the projects, and maybe you can give me a shortcut here. But I was just curious about the traffic, what has changed in your plan, or how it's identified now and is final for crossings the highway and along this high school street for kids getting to school, for safety along the school.
At Ocean Lake? Or where? because they redid Ocean Lake,
Okay,
and then they have that 32nd Street, they're putting a light.
okay, so maybe it's, I just can't get it.
Whether it's included in the TSP or not, we are looking at a striping plan for High School Drive right now, as we're working with the school. They made a few parking changes on their side, and so we're working on better striping for that road.
And I believe it is, and also Project P44, there's a highway crossing at the intersection of High School, or pedestrian crossing on the highway where it intersects High School, to help with that as well.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you. And I guess two final things. One is it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Ocean Lake area and how that effort of planning comes about. And also, I was just curious about, of all the funding ideas, did you get support for one type of funding over another, creative or not? He's smiling.
Officially, no. No, there's some good discussion on it. I guess if I had any takeaways from that discussion, it would be probably skepticism that a gas tax would work over concerns that fuel prices are already higher here than in other places. And it's difficult to pass those as well, and anywhere, usually. And some thought that maybe there would be more promise to doing something like bonding. So especially if people knew exactly what the projects were that they were going to pay for, a lot of times that's easier to get them to pay extra if they knew what was going to be billed. And the nice thing about the bonding is also it's for a temporary period of time. So you're paying extra for a set period of time for known projects rather than a fuel tax where people could be concerned about not knowing where the money's going to go, if it's going to be used wisely, and it's there indefinitely. So those are about the only two big takeaways I could give you from those conversations that we had.
Was there,
on the road that comes out from Rhodes End, I guess it's Clancy Street on 101. Did you guys ever approach FEMA about the use of that route for emergency exit? That might be, and Mr. Nicholson may address that later, but that might be the only way out of Rhodes End neighborhood. So FEMA might be interested in supporting that.
Thanks. No, we did not have that conversation.
a few years ago on the Budget Committee, we were talking about improvements for the roads and not being able to use like the TRT tax because it was for a certain thing. There was talk of a water franchise fee. If we established a franchise fee, it could be separate. So I don't know if that was taken up for your possible addition to, instead of increasing the water rates like they would impose a franchise fee that would be able, because it would be a separate way that you could apply it to the streets. And I don't know if that has been looked upon other than 2 years ago when we brought that up. So I don't know if that's something that still could be available.
No, it didn't come up. I don't think I could speak to whether or not that's an available option. I don't know what conversations have been had around that since then.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think there.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, in our community, we're a tourist community, that a lot of the wear and tear on our roads comes from the thousands and thousands of tourists who come here 8 months out of the year. And what are some ways that we can share the burden of paying for the maintenance of our roads by sharing that cost with these tourists?
Yeah, it's always an interesting part of the discussion. It's kind of who pays and balancing that out, whether it's existing residents or employers or new development or visitors. It's kind of like you're doing now, a portion that comes from your transient room tax. I think it's Newport. They have a fuel tax, but they increase it in the summer. Again, local residents are still going to get hit with that too, but that's a way to try to recoup more from visitors.
We're not recommending any funding types in this plan, so we're trying to list them all and there are even potentials that we haven't listed will be for the discussion, in the future, the Budget Committee, the council, and you all. So that's I want to make sure we capture all of those ideas, so we have the full list of potential funding sources.
Yeah, and there were a list of potential options in the TSP if you didn't see that. But again, it's really more to help the conversation along.
Further questions? Thank you very much. Now is the time for public comment and testimony. Each person may have up to 3 minutes to provide comment. Please state your name for the record. And I don't see a sign-up sheet for this.
Anybody?
I don't see anybody there. Anybody in the audience who didn't sign up? Comments from representatives of public agencies? Is there a motion to close the public hearing in the record?
I make a motion to close the public record in the
Hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So, what is the pleasure of the commission? Discussion?
No discussion, I'll make a motion. I'll move a motion to recommend to City Council to adopt a system plan.
I'll second the motion.
Did you want to? You're good? All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, let's have a roll call for that.
Okay. Cunningham? Hinton? Aye. Griffiths?
Aye.
Long?
Yes.
Hoagland?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The City Council will hold a public hearing on this matter on Monday, October 12th, 2015 at 6 p.m. Excuse me? I can't hear him.
He said he doesn't want a break.
Break, people, in the 5 minutes? Okay, we'll take a short intermission. For somebody's TWB. Good idea. Okay.
Let me see, I'll check. Look today.
He always writes me notes. Oh, it was off.
Is it? Is it?
That's good.
Moving on. Old business, we don't have any scheduled. So the new business is Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. Mark Nicholson, Emergency Preparedness Coordinator.
Mark asked me to introduce him. This is Mark Nicholson. He's our Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. I forgot to turn it.
Where do you see that? Yeah.
Okay, let's try again. Sound better? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this is Mark Nicholson. He's our Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. Before we had Mark on staff, I was pretty much in charge of keeping our natural hazards mitigation plan updated, and we had meetings every 6 months. Then the county asked us to participate in an update, a 5-year update, which is required. So fortunately, Mark has taken over the bulk of that responsibility. I've gone to several meetings myself, but with him, but sometimes I couldn't, and he has really taken the final draft and reviewed it and has prepared a presentation for you this evening.
Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. Yeah, this is the first time that we've had a chance to discuss these issues, so before I start, I'll just say that I'm hoping this will be the start of a discussion. It won't end tonight, that we can figure out a way to do something along these lines on an ongoing basis. Specifically tonight, I want to talk to you about the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. I'll talk a bit about what that is, even though you received a link to it, and I assume you've at least glanced over it, if not read it in great detail. But what that plan is, and more generally how it fits in the general context of emergency preparedness in the city. There's a number of other plans I want to talk about because they're all interrelated. So I'll talk, and that's the first point, I'll talk a bit about what the other activities are and how they relate to use the acronym NHMP. What the NHMP is and how it was developed. One of the objectives of the process was to one of the objectives of the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan process was to develop or design activities that could be carried out over a long period of time, similar to the TSP or master plans, but it's not near the level of detail at this point. Maybe in the future it could be. So we'll talk a bit about some of the key activities or any others that you would like to discuss. If you've looked, I think there are 25 on the list that for Lincoln City that you'll see. And then the last part is just some of the critical dates leading up to this point, and I want to make a few other comments about some events that are coming up related to this. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, as Deb mentioned, is a plan that's mandated by FEMA. It's required that we adopt the plan in order to be eligible for certain types of FEMA funding. Like a number of other plans that fit that same fit that bill as well, but the NHMP specifically is required. So that's one reason that we're moving ahead with it, and I'll talk about some other reasons that I think are just as valid. The process got a little bit delayed. It should have been completed last year. That's when our last plan was 2009. It should have been renewed last year. But due to some snags in the FEMA grant funding cycle, because this is driven by grant funds, it really didn't pick up until started last year and really just this year. So we're a little bit behind behind on getting this approved. When I say we, the plan is a county plan, and we have an addendum in that plan. So our plan, in effect, stands alone, pretty much, but it still fits within the context of the county plan, and the plan is a county plan. So this was sent to FEMA in July, and they approved it. The state approves it, and they send it on to FEMA. So it's moved to that point. The county commission, I'm not sure if this has happened or it could be happening this week, but they will adopt it this week, and then it's expected that the other municipalities, well, it's not only municipalities, and other jurisdictions will do the same over the course of the next few weeks. We are scheduled to present this to council for adoption on the 28th of this month. And that's because of the schedule that the county needs to keep, just being consistent with that. Anyway, we can talk more about any of that as we move forward. So, first of all, how this fits into the context. The Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan is meant to, it provides an analysis of the risks that we face, again, natural hazards, not only tsunami, earthquake, but windstorm, volcano, wildfire, things that may or may not apply to us, but in a broad sense. Assess the risk, and then design long-term and short-term strategies to mitigate those risks. And that's really the objective of the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is what it sounds like. But that fits into a broader context. The second point I mentioned, in addition to that, there are the ongoing emergency preparedness activities that that's basically what I do, and an AmeriCorps member works with me on that, and we have a committee within the city that's emergency planning committee. We meet on a monthly basis and talk about these issues, and they're all quite actively involved on certain issues. In addition to, and that activity tends to focus on outreach, community outreach with staff, training, both staff and I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to extend that training, or through either formal training or workshops, to elected and appointed officials, to the Planning Commission, to the City Council, so that we can raise a level of awareness. And Steve mentioned at the break, the New Yorker article that recently got everyone's attention. I think we'll be sort of riding that wave, if you will, for the foreseeable future, because we do have people's attention. Another one of the major plans that we produce, that we have a version of, and it will be updated this year as well, is the Emergency Operations Plan. This is more focused on the mitigation plan. Says, looking out, we need to make sure that schools are located in the right place, that bridges are up to snuff, that as far as possible, especially public buildings, are seismically fit, etc. You know, the long term, what do we do to, when this happens, make the results not quite as bad as maybe they would be otherwise. The Emergency Operations Plan is more focused on response. What do we do when this happens? How do we make sure we've got the infrastructure, we've got people trained, we've got everything in place, so that we can try to put the pieces together as soon as we can, and try to save lives, basically, that being the top priority. Another plan that will also be in this fiscal year we'll be updating is the continuity of operations plan. And this is the plan that says we've had some sort of disaster. It could be a fire in this building. We've had some sort of disaster. What are our expectations, and how do we get the city up and running again? Or how does a business get up and running again after a disaster? And again, in theory, all businesses would have some idea of this plan. And it's more or less true. An individual family could also have that sort of plan. So these are all interrelated, and it's my hope that we can strengthen those interrelationships as we move forward. Now, there's a natural hazard mitigation plan. Transportation is a key element. We talked about evacuation routes possibly, but as are elements of the stormwater master plan, sewer, water. In other words, all of these plans start to tie in together to a certain extent. So I think as we move forward, we'll see more and more of that, which means that you as a planning commission will probably see this issue coming up, for example, when the comprehensive plan, when the work really begins on that. Some of these emergency management issues will be built into those decisions and that design. I don't know whether you can read all this, but I just wanted to mention a couple of the other plans that we already have: comprehensive plan, master plans. There are a whole number of, it could be down to individual plans, map your neighbor. There's sort of a web of different plans that tie into these, to the standard natural hazard mitigation, emergency operations, and continuity of operations. And we try to make those links wherever possible. I talked about this a little bit. What is the NHMP? Basically, we identify threats, assess risks, and try to come up with mitigation measures that will make sense in response to those risks. Like other plans, and this is an important point, these are not static. These are, in an ideal world, they're almost, they're very dynamic. In other words, we develop the plan and then we modify it as needed over time. So I would encourage any of you, whether it's tonight or later or any time, these will be posted. This plan will be on the website. Any comments, we can update this plan as we go. And I'm confident. It's not just I'm confident. I know that there are a number of issues with the existing plan. I mean, if it's down to typos, but also there's some things that we want to add. The plan was developed It was developed in a collaborative effort, but it was actually written by a group out of the University of Oregon. They were administering the grant for updating these plans. And this is the Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience, sort of out of the planning group in the University of Oregon. So like a lot of these plans, it starts as kind of a boilerplate cut and paste activity and then gets modified over time. So that's what we've been doing for the past year. As we mentioned, it's really a Lincoln County plan, and then our part is an addendum to that. Why do we do it? One reason I mentioned, and I just want to make it clear, this is not the only reason that we want to engage in this activity, but one reason is because if we don't do it, we don't qualify for certain FEMA funding. But in addition to that, it should be like any other master plan. It should lay the groundwork for the long-term activities that we feel we need to take. Some could be quite expensive if it's building an alternate route to get residents out of Rhodes Inn, for example, because it'd be cut off by a tsunami debris, if nothing else. Then that's a fairly expensive activity. Some are less so, putting up new evacuation signs possibly, or there's any number of smaller activities. So part of the motivation for doing this is to develop that, or to assist in developing that long-term plan. Another is, to the extent we document that we are planning these things, and I think this was mentioned with the TSP as well, then there are some number of grants that we can credibly apply for, because we can say, look, we put this in our natural hazard mitigation plan, and we've done certain things to meet these objectives, so it adds credibility to a grant if we wanted to do something similar related. So, I mean, I think that's also a very strong reason for doing these plans. How is developed? Talk a bit about that. A collaborative effort. There are, citizens, public agencies, nonprofit groups, private sector, regional organizations. There were a number of different groups that gave input to this. I don't think the outreach was as good as it should be, and I think it will be better as we move forward. But there was an effort made to get input from a lot of different places. As I mentioned, the Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience at the University of Oregon was the lead, or led this process, compiled the documents, facilitated the sessions primarily. And they did. I think they were doing this, if not for much of Oregon. I'm not sure how many contractors really were doing this work, but they were one of the primary groups. In the list of 25 activities that are at the back of the Lincoln City addendum, I just picked out a few to give a sense of the sort of activities and the ones that I think are important and tend to fall outside of existing master plans. There's a few public works activities on the list that are like increasing the size of culverts, for example, that falls very directly in the stormwater master plan. These that I talked about probably don't, and probably would require some other mechanism to figure out how to fund them. One, and this has been talked about, is our police station is, if you look at the inundation maps, is right on the edge of what's projected to be the inundation boundary for a worst-case tsunami. It's probably not the place you want your police station to be, and also we don't have any reason to think that it would withstand very much of an earthquake shock. And that's the center of operations for our police. That's where the dispatch center is, and all the equipment associated with that. So clearly, moving that out is a high priority for a number of reasons. It's also not really it's not sufficient at this point. I think it's overwhelmed by our current level of the police force. But this is not something, this plan does not talk about how is anyone going to pay for this. That would happen through some other mechanism. But just to say, as a strategic activity, this is something that's been identified that needs to be looked at and needs to happen at some point. We added an item for Cutler City. As many of you know, throughout the city we have we have 15 assembly areas, and these are basically areas that if residents need to evacuate in the event that there's a tsunami and people are fleeing, the idea is an assembly area is just a gathering point. It's nothing more than that. It's where two streets cross, maybe. There's no structure or anything else. We have one of those across 101 from Cutler City. It's not really sufficient. Anyway, and that's an area that we propose doing some research to try to determine what we can do to make that situation better, and just that broadly. I mean, and there aren't a lot of options, but that's a large number of people that will need to get out somewhere, and they have 3 directions they can't go. There's only one that really is going to work. So that's what this item is. The fifth is just a continuing community outreach, but more specifically, we're hoping to focus this year, and Oregon Emergency Management is starting to add a number of projects to focus on evacuation routes and wayfinding. And this is a certain amount of ground truthing. I'm hoping it means getting involved with local communities and doing some exercises in the middle of the night and figuring out how people are going to move from their homes or wherever they are. There are a number of projects now. They're called things like Race the Wave or Beat the Wave in Seaside and Cannon Beach that are basically trying to create a model and say, if you are at this point and you walk at this pace, it's going to take you 45 minutes to get to a safe point, or 5 minutes, or an hour and a half. If the bridges are functioning, if these bridges are out, then it will take you this long. That's the type of modeling and analysis, and this is done, Oregon Emergency Management and DOGAMI, the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, I guess. So this type of modeling will be coming here, this type of project, if not this year, next year, but before long, just to get a more sophisticated look at evacuation. And this involves actual ground truthing, putting people on the ground and saying, okay, walk at this pace and see how long it takes you, and try it in 2 in the morning with no lights and see how that works. And they're also trying to look at some innovative ways to actually provide lighting, or, how do you do this at 3 in the morning? It's not real, with no electricity. So there's possibilities of solar lighting or reflective strips, or whatever. But these kind of activities are going on, so we hope to incorporate those as the research picks up, and maybe be involved in some of that work. And I numbered these. These are the numbers that are actually in the document. 22, research and implement plan for supply caches throughout the city. Now, most of you are probably familiar with Taft and Ocean Lake Elementary supply caches. If not, these are containers. One is at Kirstis back. It's kind of back in the parking area. They are containers, and they contain a lot of water and maybe then some other supplies in both events. And they're meant to be able to handle the number of students that are in those schools if something happens during a school day. One possibility is that we may want to look at having more of those around town to serve citizens or tourists. And I should just mention, this may be a good time to mention, one of the key questions, and this is where people in your position have significant input, is what are the expectations? I mean, if we have, what do we really think we're realistically going to be able to do? I get the question frequently, how are you going to feed 20,000 tourists for the 6 weeks that people see we're going to be cut off or something? The frank answer is that it will be difficult. But so maybe that's not very realistic, but what is? And then there's the funding and all of those issues. So we don't really know. Yeah, this next item is how to handle tourists. What can we, part of it's education, part of it's outreach in the hotels, just to make sure they know as much as they need to know to at least get to safety. And then what can we do beyond that? Big question mark. Nobody has the answer. I mean, no one up and down the coast really has an answer for those things, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be thinking about them. And the last, which relates directly to the work that you do, is integration, and this is sort of a statewide priority, integrating the natural hazard mitigation plan type of activities into the comprehensive plan, or maybe those, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but taking that into consideration with the new comprehensive plan work that you will all be involved in. So these things start to become linked together, and I think it adds more credibility to all of them if they're consistent with what we're doing in another area, because then we've said in the natural hazard mitigation plan that we're going to do certain things. If that's echoed in the comp plan, it has more credibility, and it's more likely to happen for that matter, too. Just a quick, I included this in the memo that we sent out, but in 2009 was when that was the last adopted version of the natural hazard mitigation plan. There's been, off and on kind of work since 2014. Just in July, the draft was submitted to FEMA. It was approved. Like I mentioned, this month is when these things are getting approved and adopted by the various jurisdictions, or at least that's the plan. I should say what staff is asking of you, if you feel so inclined, is to make a recommendation to the City Council that they move ahead with the adoption of this plan. And again, keep in mind, as I mentioned, this is a snapshot. This will evolve, and I think we've already had a couple strong suggestions of activities that we probably want to incorporate. So it is an evolving plan, and that's it until see what you've got to say.
Thank you, Mark. That was excellent. Do we have any questions for Mark?
One question. How safe are our reservoirs? Are they likely to withstand a major earthquake? Could we lose our water supply in seconds?
Probably, yeah. I mean, I don't know seconds, but I mean, there's concerns about that. The various studies would indicate that water supplies probably will go just from the earthquake. So, I mean, Lila, if she were here, might argue with me, but it's not sure. If you think of if the tsunami earthquake scenario, we're talking about a huge earthquake. So the chance of there being broken lines throughout the system is pretty high. I guess that's more what I'm saying. So will a specific reservoir body of water hold? It could, but the system itself is questionable. I mean, yeah.
What are the issues around constraints around the caches, particularly?
Constraints?
Yeah.
You mean having a lot of them?
Yeah.
Probably money. I mean, first of all, but I think there's also a question of where you put them. I mean, they are big. At least the current type of thing that a lot of people use. These containers are not very nice looking, and not everyone wants one in their front or backyard. I mean, there's that. There's the actual location, flat ground, where you can put them in an area that's high enough to be of value. And then the cost of doing it. We collaborated with the Lincoln County School District and the Fire Department. We each, the city and those two, it was just the three of us, each got a $2,500 matching grant from the county commissioners the last few years. So that with the match, we each contributed $5,000. So for about $15,000, these containers were put in Taft and Ocean Lake. So if you multiply that, it's not a huge number. It's not millions, but at the same time, there is an issue. I think it's, and there are other options for that. In Cannon Beach, they got a container, and then they had individuals store a big, like 55-gallon drum with their supplies, and they let them in a couple times a year. There are different models of how to do that. I think the first question is just kind of a commitment to looking at the various options. But financial is part of it, maintenance, because once these are in place, someone has to make sure that the water gets switched out once in a while, and that rats aren't eating through whatever's in there, whether it's, even if it's not food, but if it's bedding or that type of thing.
Is there any part of the plan that addresses things like skills inventory and tools and supplies inventories throughout the city? We talked about that in Rhodes End, David's plan. We talked about micro caches, volunteer micro caches. Skills inventory is very important in an island neighborhood like ours.
Well, I think the island neighbor, like many of, we would have, in the worst case, we would have many island neighborhoods, and I think in an ideal sense, there would be some focus in at least what we perceive to be the places between bridges or whatever creates the island. And by skills inventory, you're talking about human skills, or you're talking about equipment?
Well, there's both of those things. I'm thinking in a tsunami, the ability to cut up logs is a really important, would be a really important capability. An inventory of where are all the chainsaws in an island would be an important piece of the inventory. Gas supplies for the chainsaws or for vehicles.
At maybe a smaller level than you're thinking about, but there's a program that we're trying, to get more neighborhoods to get involved in. It's called a Map Your Neighborhood exercise. But it's a smaller scale, I think, than you're talking about. But with the idea being inventory, who knows what, who has what equipment, who needs special care, maybe. Because, a lot of the lessons learned from these huge events show that it's really neighbors that save lives, because by the time the responders, I'm not saying they don't have a role, but it takes a while for responders to get out. They're going to all be, overwhelmed. So the neighborhood support is really critical. So I think these Map Your Neighborhood grassroots kind of things have the potential of preparing people maybe, better than anything else. But if they had access possibly to a cache of supplies, it makes it that much easier, maybe.
Yeah, and in the equipment, I'm thinking of things like an electrical generator. Electrical generators, I don't know for what it's worth, but I have a really big compressor. It's not going to be worth a damn when my electricity's out. So I'd put my compressor in the inventory, and somebody put their generator in the inventory, and bam, we've got a capability in an emergency.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it's, that you could easily do that same sort of that Map Your Neighborhood model on a larger, an island level. Not everyone is so willing to go on TV and talk about what they have, you know?
I used to.
No, but seriously, there is a bit of a concern in neighborhoods, and to say this is the inventory of everything I have in my garage in case anyone needs it. But that would be in a sense, sort of the ideal. But it happens plus or minus in different neighborhoods. I think some are more maybe open to that.
Mr. Chair. We keep talking local caches and whatnot. I mean, is anybody considered off-site caches, Inland Lee, Grand Ron, or McMinnville, something that can support maybe to help support 20,000 people? Because I know the deer population won't last very long.
Well, yeah, I think. I guess usually when that's discussed, it's not considered that these are caches that we somehow create and manage, but this is what FEMA does, and they will eventually. Eventually, it'll take, weeks maybe to get the system up and running, but the FEMA, Red Cross, these organizations are set up to do that, and they do have cache supplies in different locations, once they can get them in.
These containers, a lot of them are set up and grab with helicopters and fly them into where they need to go. And I was thinking maybe if we can get something like that a little closer and set up to the populations that are up and down the coast and get a quicker response that way. I don't know if it's something to work together with FEMA more with that or what.
Well, I think part of it is identifying areas where a helicopter could come in and drop these containers. And again, we don't have an overabundance of probably flat areas that helicopters would like very well that will still be flat and won't be covered with debris or whatever else, and are out of anyway. But I think that's definitely one of the things that I know we've talked about in our emergency planning sessions. If there's a way to sort of pre-identify, like villages, if you think of up in there where there's not right now a lot else going on, if that's still. It's out of the tsunami zone, so it doesn't have that threat. But there could be areas that could be maybe even prepared a little bit in advance to handle helicopters bringing containers.
Along that line, is there a map that shows after the 9.2 earthquake? Is there a map that guesses, or a model that guesses what the lay of the land will look like? So is there a way to identify those areas is what I'm thinking.
There are Dogami, which is again the Department of Geology, just to shorten it, has created, they've created the tsunami inundation maps. They've created landslide maps. Slido is one of the applications. They've created maps showing areas of high liquefaction, which is a quicksandy type thing, and also subsidence, because one of the things that's expected to happen in some areas is that we could have a slippage of vertical of like 6 to 8 feet or something in some areas, but it's not uniform. Some areas might rise, so it's not so simple. But so they're moving that direction to address these various things, but they don't have yet, but it seems a clear direction, a sort of integrated map that basically says you're in real trouble here for one of a variety of reasons or something. But the pieces, they're getting the pieces, and my guess is that the plan would be to create a more sophisticated model that would say this area or this stretch is likely to subside 4 feet, and that would have this effect, that sort of thing. Because I think they're getting the raw facts pretty much in place. Yeah.
I think sooner rather than later, if we can get some kind of, for the island map into the hands of everybody, start to realize, oh my, 700 of us are going to be underwater. Just publicly available topos showing inundation.
Well, the tsunami inundation maps are publicly available. Everyone may not know about them, but they get distributed at outreach sessions and a lot of events and that type of thing. And maybe yeah.
Mark, they're available here at the city, aren't they?
Yeah, they're available here at the city. They're available at the cultural center. They're available at a number of places. But also, we try to do outreach events and get them out. So they're available. I'm not sure if people religiously, if you're looking at a map, you need to, if you're trying to be a little bit prepared, you look at where you live, where you work, where your kids go to school, or whatever other critical locations there are. It's not just a question of where you live. It's getting a sense of where else am I and do I need, and we also promote very strongly kits in your car and at home and that type of thing, and food at home especially if you're not in the zone. But I'm hoping we'll be able to ramp up our outreach. It's not just us. The fire department, Jim Coos, gets out there quite a bit and talks to people and always has maps, or should always have maps on hand. I'm sure he probably does. The CERT people are out there spreading the word to some extent, but we need to do it more.
Mark, also, it is online and there's a phone app, right?
There is a phone app, but there's through the website, OregonTsunami.org is a good place to go. You can actually look at and print the evacuation maps or the tsunami inundation maps. You can also enter an address, and it will tell you whether it's in or out for people like that. And there's also an app that you can get through that site.
We've talked mostly about tsunamis. The other hazard also possible.
In the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, first natural hazard, but there's sort of a weighting, and it's based upon geology, history, input from people that participate in the process. There's a weighting that says this event has a certain probability of happening. We are vulnerable to that type of event at a certain level. In other words, there's a number of factors that then rate, and for us and Lincoln County as well, the highest rating is windstorms and wind and ice. Those are separated, but because we know those are going to happen every year, and while the vulnerability level isn't as high, they don't do as much damage. We know they're going to happen. I mean, it's almost 100%. So, unlike, say, the tsunami earthquake scenario that, has whatever numbers you like, but there's a chance, but it's not a given that it'll happen in any of our lifetimes. But if it does, we're very vulnerable to it. So, those ratings, and for some areas that would obviously be fire, would be that. That natural hazard that rates the highest if you're in eastern Oregon or, in the mountains.
Does terrorist attacks and Korean nuclear weapons and that kind of thing fit into that scheme as well?
Well, not this one, because it is natural hazards, unless depending, I guess, on how you, but it does fit into the broader scheme. Usually, this natural hazard is kind of an aberration in my mind, because usually the terminology that people use today in general for this emergency management is all hazard, management preparedness. In other words, if you prepare for a winter storm outage of 2 weeks, you're also preparing a bit for something different, because you're trying to figure out how you're going to be organized, how you're operating, who does what, where you operate from. So in that sense, that all-hazard approach, a chemical spill, a terrorist attack, et cetera, would fall into that, because you have procedures for establishing an emergency operations center that would be appropriate for any of those, just a place for information to be collected and analyzed, dispersed. The police, fire, they know how to cordon areas off, and et cetera, whatever the hazard or whatever the disaster. So, yeah, again, the natural hazard mitigation is a bit of an aberration, I think, because most of the thinking, most of the discussion is just to consider it all hazard, because when you prepare for one, you more or less are preparing for others as well. It's a different scale.
Just have one more suggestion about, for any hazard, but probably in particular earthquakes and tsunamis, and that would be the number of tourists we do have and visitors to the area who really don't know where to go, even if there was a sign. What does that mean to them? But in addition to that, I really would like to see in the future, maybe in your plan, if we can get to this level of detail of being able to have go kits for, at least for the capacity for every hotel room or motel room or VRD. I think it's out there a ways, I know, but
well, I don't know. A couple of the relevant things. Oregon Emergency Management (OEM) is doing a pilot project now with the hotel industry to try. They've developed some videos to train employees and some materials to give to their clients, the people that are staying in the hotels. And just to kind of raise awareness. So that is going on, but the key is to get the employees trained so that, as we always say over and over, it's not so much the message to employees is you need to prepare at home so that your family will be okay, because otherwise people won't be at work and they won't be doing anything. That's true whether they're police or fire or whatever their role. So it's assumed people will take care of their families first, then whatever else. So if we can stress upon all these groups to prepare their families, they're more confident, then maybe they can be of some benefit to all these tourists that are in the hotel. The other thing, I think it was maybe I'm wrong, but at one of the Roads End discussions, we talked about whether it's a requirement or subsidized or however you do it, that VRDs could have, say, a little lockbox with kind of like you have the mini bar in a hotel.
Break glass in case of emergency.
That has a go kit, and people are instructed how to do it, and if they take it and use it, they get charged for it. Again, kind of like the mini bar type thing. Just to, rather than, and how that's, I'm not suggesting that Richard is going to want to tack that onto the VRD regulations, but with encouragement, who knows? But that type of thing, and hotels, you could argue the same thing. They only, obviously you got more people to deal with, but it would make sense that they have some provision for whether they entrust the individuals, and maybe if they are in the zone, they have just identified someone's garage up a hill where they store things or something. I mean, I don't know, but there's got to be some creative ways to make it happen. But education, I think, is a big part.
Speaking of education, did you hire someone in your AmeriCorps position?
Yes, she just started 2 weeks ago. So, and that will help considerably with the AmeriCorps position is focused primarily on the outreach aspect, because if we want to organize sessions, there's some amount of legwork that goes into that. So that would be my hope, that we could get out to more and more and more neighborhoods. And if any of you or anyone that's watching or watches is part of a group, a neighborhood group or any other group, and would like to hear the spiel and talk a bit about what you can do in your neighborhood, we are always available for that. And I'm hoping we can ramp that up again soon.
Further questions?
I do have a generator for rent if you need it.
And I know where you live.
Well, everyone does now, so.
What would you like to see this commission recommend to the city council?
I guess I would like to see you recommend to the city council that they, on the 28th, adopt the natural hazards mitigation plan. So that's in the immediate term. In the longer term, I would like to see a way for this commission for us to be involved in this discussion as we move forward, and I think especially around expectations and how we deal with this. I think we haven't done that very well in the past. At least I haven't, and I don't know previously. That could be training or workshops or whatever form. I mean, whatever form it takes. But that's what I would hope in the longer term, that this becomes part of the discussion that we have, and it's not a once in a while.
Actually, it's a two-parter. One is, I really like the idea of somehow incorporating this into the comprehensive plan. I think that's really a great idea. And secondly, thank you. This is a lot of work, and it's wonderful.
Thank you.
If I can respond to that a little bit, we will be incorporating this into the comprehensive plan. One of the sections of the comprehensive plan is hazards mitigation and response and so on. So it'll be an important piece.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Excellent. Do we have a motion for a recommendation?
I'll make a motion for recommendation to the city council to adopt the natural hazards mitigation plan.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, reports and comments. Community Development Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we've got a couple announcements. One is that on Friday, October 2nd, from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Community Center, we will be having a workshop. There's no registrations needed. Everyone's invited. It's for people of all ages, abilities, and so on. It's a hands-on workshop to learn about the role of city planning and urban design in shaping how we live. And James Rojas, who is an internationally known an award-winning urban planner, community activist, and artist, will be leading the workshop. And this will end up feeding into the comprehensive plan process. The idea is people are going to be asked to basically design their ideal city and also design what they would like to see Lincoln City be in the future and Lincoln City's parks and so on. It's not a sterile sort of sit around and talk thing. It's very interactive, a lot of activity, and a very dynamic thing, and they're very well received when they've been done before, so we're looking forward to that a lot. Again, that's on Friday, October 2nd, from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Community Center.
Okay, and James Rojas, who he mentioned, is here that date because he is also part of our Nell Scott Gap Plan, a Community Design Week. And that goes from Wednesday, September 30th through Saturday, October 3rd. And on Wednesday, the 30th, we have a public workshop from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening. And everyone obviously is invited to attend. It's at City Hall in the space. On Thursday, October 1st, we have Open Studio where you can go and watch the architect planner Lawrence Kamar, our consultant for this project, as he's working, and he will and talk to you and hear your ideas, and you can show him on his maps, what you have in mind. I think that should be very interesting. Open Studio continues on Friday the 2nd from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The consultants also, and maybe staff, are going to be at the high school on Thursday also, having a workshop with the students, so that will be nice. Saturday, October 3rd, we've got a Spanish language workshop in the morning, 8:30 to 10 at La Roca Restaurant with James Rojas. And at the same day, Saturday, we'll have a public workshop following that, 10:30 to 1:30. And then following that, and that one is at Scott Plaza on the Nell Scott Strip. So we're hoping for good weather. And then the final one is a advisory committee meeting. And that will be from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock here at City Hall. What we hope to accomplish during this week is generating, first of all, a series of alternative development patterns for that neighborhood, and then by the end of the week, coming up with a preferred alternative. So a lot of work being done and a lot of progress moving that plan forward.
One other thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Deb, that will be of particular importance to you is that on Thursday, October 1st, from 3 to 5, it's a joint City Council Planning Commission meeting to receive a briefing on the Nell Scott Gap project. Have right now.
Thank you. Planning Commissioners, any reports, comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of them.
Go ahead.
I noticed when I was reviewing the minutes in the meeting from 2 weeks ago that I missed, that we set what looked like a precedent when we required bonding in advance for a project to be done. It was on the Barnes project, and as long as I've been here, we haven't required bonding before. But we did require bonding on his project for that road. And I guess what I'd like city staff to come up with what did that cost him. I'd like to know what did it cost to put a bond on that road project, because it does cost something, and it's something that I'd like to know. If it's not a very big price, I think that we ought to establish a policy that will do it to everybody. It's got to be even played. We'll choose to bond this project and not this project. Ought to think about putting it into our procedures to bond all these infrastructure projects ahead of time, or not to do it at all, but not on a piece-by-piece basis, because planners and developers need to have a feeling of consistency come to this city, or they're going to feel like I'll be shot to death, and I don't want to work in Lincoln City. So I'd like to find out first and foremost if it was pricey, because I don't want to imply it is. I don't do it. Not too pricey. I think we ought to put it into our procedures. That's what we do, for infrastructure.
We probably can find out what that number is. And we have required it in other situations in the past.
The attorney said it's good to do, so I don't have a problem.
Yeah, it is good to do. Particularly, there are some situations where it's clearly a really good idea. Like this one in particular, I think it was because of the potential for harming other
Somebody
people.
else's.
Tear up the road and abandon the project, then somebody's left holding the bag. And
Well, I know a lot of projects go under halfway through.
Right.
And so if it's not too pricey, I think it's a good idea to go with, to make it part of our process, but make it equal.
Some of the villages at Cascade Head is required to be bonded.
Right, and so we have
and
roads
those
up
kinds of
there.
things. So in the past, it's more or less depended on the specifics of the project, but we'll see what I can find out.
Yeah, if
for
it's
a
like,
number.
1% of the cost or something small, then no big deal, but
Or maybe even guidelines, of help, to help with decisions.
I just want to make sure that a developer looking from the outside can look at us and say, I can expect this, or
Yeah, and maybe the best thing is that they should expect it, but they might not have to do it.
go over that too. And another one is, I have, for our own public, I called 14 apartment complexes within, or rooms, apartments for my kids that are coming this way. And I was basically told, not a chance in the world that you're going to get an apartment in this town, workforce priced apartment in this town for years. For years. So when we see a project that comes down, there is a need. There's a desperate need.
And I can also respond to that a little bit. There are other developers that have recognized that need and are talking to us. So I think we'll see more than just these projects that you've seen lately.
I don't know. I was impressed by the amount of need. They were telling me, I have 150 applications on my desk. I'm not taking more. Others that said, well, we don't take applications anymore because we don't want to have to store them. I mean, that's the kind of response I got from apartment owners.
Boy.
There's a need.
Any other comments? And there is no public, well, yeah, there is. Mark, you want to make a comment on a non-agenda item? All right, future agenda items and next meetings. Our next scheduled meeting is Thursday, October 1st, 2015 at 3 p.m. Note the time change. That's the Nelscott Gap Plan briefing, joint meeting with the City Council.
I won't be here. I can't make 3.
Yeah, I know. It's tough to have to work for a while.
It is.
And then Tuesday, October 6th, 6 p.m., we have CPA and ZC 2015-04, Olivia Beach Phases 1 and 2, request for VR zoning, a work session on proposed code amendments and the transportation plan, and adoption of VRD license appeal final orders. Adjourned. Job?